agenda. First one is the update on the City Center project, and Langford Associates will lead that, but I think Jim Nichols is going to start it off.
Excuse me, Jim, could I just make one introduction before we start? Mike Svets is our new Parks and Recreation Director, and if Mike would stand up, and he just started today, so everybody should welcome him to Goodyear. So. Thank you, and sorry for interrupting.
That's okay. Welcome aboard.
Mayor, council members, I'm going to stand back here just to give a very brief intro, and then the team is here to do the major presentation. As you noted, this is an update on the City Center project. We have various members of the Goodyear City Center development team here, headed up by Langford Development, and Rob Langford in front of me here will be giving introductions and then leading into the rest of the group, giving you various updates on the different components we've been working on to this point. So, Rob.
Thanks, Jim. Rob Langford, Langford Associates. Glad to be here again. I have the pleasure of being my company the managing member of a partnership that includes my partners Eric Judson of JMI Sports, Phelps Development. Harmon Anderson is here tonight from Phelps, and Carrier Johnson, and we have the pleasure of Gordon's Carrier's presence here tonight. So you're not accepting an award tonight, like you.
No. No awards.
We're all cognizant, as I'm sure you guys are, of the status of the economy. We are glad to report from our perspective, and I think my partners would agree, that we're involved in a series of projects that are moving ahead because they're got some public funding, private funding, and we're we don't like this economy any better than anybody else does, but we remain healthy, as do my partners, and we have look very much forward to getting this project going on time for the city of Goodyear.
Bob, can I interrupt you?
Sure.
Do you mind having your partners saying their names since
Sure.
we have not met them? And
I don't think you know this guy, but
yeah, I know him. That's okay.
Oh, where do you want to
Go
start?
ahead, Brett.
I'm Brett Tullis with Carrier Johnson.
I am Ray Varela with Carrier Johnson.
And I'm Gordon Carrier Johnson.
We know who you are. I'm Mary Pampu with Langford Associates. I'll be the face you'll see probably most of the time presenting to you.
Thank you.
And I think really with that, I'm going to turn it over to Mary, who is a longtime employee of my companies. She's the principal in our company, and executive vice president, and the project executive for this project. So Mary, with that, take it from here.
I wanted to just give you a little schedule update. First of all, we remain on schedule with regard to our design and our PAD application. We plan on having our PAD application in front of the Planning Commission in April with a presentation to Council the following month in May. Once we get through design and we get to a GMP in October, construction is scheduled to commence in December of this year with completion in January of 2011. Our team has been working steadily with all the departments in the city on programming activities since October and completed these efforts in December. We appreciate everyone's efforts on that exercise. I know it was a very long exercise, and we're happy to be here in front of you this evening to give you the opportunity to show you what we've been doing for the last few months. With that, I will turn it over to Gordon Carrier.
Thank you, Mary. Thanks for allowing us to be here tonight. We're excited to bring you up to speed on where we are. We've been doing a lot of work. You've been doing as much as we have, for sure, along the way, but we appreciate everybody's response because it's helped us assimilate information quickly. So that's good. We're going to take you through a variety of things tonight. Most of all, I'm going to bring you up to speed on the Civic Center itself, the site plan for it, master planning concepts, talk about its phasing. We're also going to talk about the Civic Center and its blockout diagrams for even individual department spaces, and then bring you also up to speed on the library programming and how it's gone to date. So we hopefully at the end of this you'll have a pretty thorough understanding, and then of course we'll answer any questions you have, which I'm sure you'll have toward the end. We wanted to start quickly with this diagram to bring reference back to the fact that we understand precisely what our quest is, which is to deal with the northwest quadrant of the project, the city center quadrant, and to concentrate on making it a very vital and special place for the city of Goodyear. We inherited this diagram, which we think is a great diagram because it talked about talked about concepts that relate to the four quadrants, ours being sun and shade. And we want you to understand that for us, these diagrams are important because they really do inform how we're designing. You're going to find that the buildings and the way we begin to even site buildings are in direct response to what the environment, what sunlight, what wind and shade and shadow should do related to buildings, which means that they respond to the environment doesn't respond to them. And so that's a big part of what we're talking about in the context of these four quadrants. So I and my partners are going to bring you up to speed on the current status of Project Master Plan, and then we'll answer questions later. Mr. Varela is going to start.
Thank you, Gordon. Part of the specific area plan, I think, as Gordon mentioned, there are important documents as we that begins to inform the design. This diagram in particular is very important as it begins to establish some really important view corridors and connections, not only as part of the Northwest Quadrant, but as part of the overall city center. The arroyo becomes a stitch or pedestrian activity that really people can walk through all the quadrants and have a nice pedestrian connection. And then the arrows that are in the orange, more specifically the one pointing to the Northwest Quadrant, and capitalizing on the view corridor to the White Tank Mountains becomes one of the major parts of the way we have organized the site. And obviously the connections to the universities are very critical. As we start a project, we always find inspiration in readings, and I found this quote that I think is appropriate for this project. Civic life is not only about authority of the government and duties of citizens, but should also encompass passion and imagination. And I think it's in that spirit that we come today of passion and imagination that we'd like to present this project. I am going to specifically talk about the open space. At the heart of this project is 7 acres of open space that pedestrians and the community can use. There are different forms of open spaces that we have which conform to the specific area plan, which are civic, arroyo, and formal open spaces. The landscape also addresses the desert environment, and the design theme of sun and shade have all been incorporated as part of the design thinking of the project. What I'd like to do is kind of show you how these spaces begin to unfold and how the pedestrian are going to use them. Starting with the Civic Plaza, this is really the heart of the campus. It is the place where is the most dense, where uses come together to create a very active space. That's about a 2-acre space allocated for a Civic Plaza. Then we have the Grand Civic Park, which is about 4 acres. And we have the Arroyo, which becomes the connector to the other quadrants, and that's about 1 acre in size. In addition to that is the connections that we mentioned earlier. We have the diagonal connection that connects the universities to the northwest, as well as the Sun Master Plan in the rest of the quadrants. And more importantly, it really bisects the site of the City Hall, which becomes the main centerpiece for the whole development. In addition, again, the university to the north, they have a grand plaza that we want to connect to and make a significant connection to that university. And again, the Arroyo. Starting with the Civic Plaza, the heart of the mixed-use campus, this space is about civic uses and private uses coming together to create a grand space. The City Hall being kind of the centerpiece of this of the project. As we have developed the project, there's a couple of things that came up. One is the need for fire accessibility for retail and for the City Hall, as well as working with our retail consultants, the ability to have visual and physical connections to the retail became important. Therefore, we have introduced a retail road, a one-way retail road that you'll come in from Yuma, get the mouse working here, from Yuma and be able to make a right-hand turn and be able to maneuver all the way across back to Main Street and go back out to Estrella Boulevard. That road is not meant to be just your asphalt road. It's meant to be part of the civic space, and it also has parallel parking next to it, again, for people to kind of park their car, be able to access the retail, and move on. But it's really part of the civic space. Right adjacent to the City Hall is the space where it is the main welcoming space for the visitors and for the community. It's a space where shade and a grove of trees will occur toward the north, so people can gather and have activity there during the summer, as well as for bands or other activities can happen as part of that civic plaza. The retail that happens is basically on the north, on the east and south edges. These have a whole different attitude. It's about people coming together and dining. Restaurants and shop and boutique shops will activate those sidewalks and begin to spill into the public plaza, creating a really vibrant and interesting dichotomy between the City Hall uses and the retail uses. Now, this space also has the ability to go to be completely 2 acres of open space and usable space, because you can cut off the internal retail road and create one contiguous space where you can have an event, you can have a farmer's market, you can have plays, you can have a variety of things happening in that space at any time that you like to close that road. Along the diagonal, there's important things to address. One would be the formal space at the corner of Yuma and Estrella. That place, again, becomes a segment of the future quadrants and completes it. And it becomes a major view corridor to City Hall and a pedestrian way as well to the city center. This becomes a retail street, what you see in blue there. So you have activity happening there. People can walk, they can stroll. You have restaurants and different landscape. So that becomes an important part of that entry. In addition to that is the entrances. These mark 2 significant entrances to City Hall. The one to the top is the main entrance to City Hall, and it was located here because it addresses both the park, the Grand Park. It allows people to park around the main street, get the mouse here, along the main street, and be able to quickly get into the City Hall with a clear visibility to it. As well, if you're parking in the parking that would happen in this other faces, this becomes the place where people can easily find the entrance. And then the entrance to the council chambers, that after hours you can access it directly from the public space and becomes kind of an extension of the public plaza where people can gather together and enter quickly to the council chambers.
Move forward.
No, this is not moving forward here. I'm not trying. It's not moving here. I think we're stuck here.
We're frozen.
We're frozen for a minute here. Here we go. Hold on. There you go. Thank you. Okay. Sorry about that. Thank you. And lastly, that diagonal terminates at the park, and this place is really a threshold. It's a place where that is part of the main street. The main street has a lot of retail uses, and this is a great opportunity for a grove of trees to anchor that end, and then you can, coffee shops, ice cream shops become part of that space that begin to activate it, so people can gather there in a summer day and look into the park. And then the water elements. We know that water elements are important, and the diagonal becomes an important corridor in which different types of water features can occur. Kids can play and activate, play in the water. There'll be other types of water opportunities along that same angle that, again, will create a variety of spaces and a variety of water opportunities as well. Now to the Civic Park. The Civic Park is about 4 acres. At the center is really the open space where the sun comes in. Again, going back to the sun and shade theme, that space is about the sun, and it's also a space where people can gather and have different types of venues there. Movies at night, music, festivals, fairs. All these becomes part of this wonderful space. At its edges, a different type of space occurs there, and these would be mostly associated with the adjacent uses. You have residential on one side, you have the multi-generational center, the performing arts center as well, and the library. There's a great opportunity for that edge to have a different attitude, one that could be where people can relax and slow down, read a newspaper, or kids can play, or it might become a drop-off area for the performing arts centers, so that edge becomes kind of activated in a different way. And lastly is the arroyo. Again, it's about 1 acre. This arroyo allows the user of the office or the libraries that really have a different path other than Main Street to move from space to space and even connect down to future quadrants. With that is the open space. I'm going to pass it over to Brett Tullis. He can talk to you about how the phasing occurs and where we are with the City Hall. Thank you.
Thank you, Ray. I'd like to start from and give you a little bit of background on the master plan and some of the program associated with it. The diagram that you're seeing up here, if I give the mouse to just,
Bet.
Thank you. What you're seeing up here is the master plan as it's been laid out. The blue color that you're seeing are the civic uses, and you'll see most notably the City Hall centered in the Civic Plaza and creating that space. But you also see that the yellow spaces are the private development that are part of this, and the gray areas are the structured parking that are integrated into the different mix of uses that are around there. We have a total of about 1.4 million square foot of building area to potentially as much as a little bit more than 1.8 million square foot of developable of building area, of which is composed of civic, retail, residential, and office. The structured parking that we're seeing is a shared parking agreement. And one other point that I did want to note was that in our previous iterations, we had shown a library a little further down on the Civic Park, and as part of the development, that library has pushed a little further north to create a vibrant little center here, which is connected to the potential connection with the university up to the north, which I think was a nice move as well as a nice counterpoint to the City Hall in Phase 1. The ground floor uses that you're seeing, again, the blue representing the civic, and in this case, the purple representing the retail. You can see that there's a high concentration of retail in the civic core, which is established by the City Hall as well as the Main Street, which becomes a major connector throughout the different parcels, and creates a nice mix of uses that creates a lively street. Additionally, as you move outside to the Civic Park area, you'll notice that we have again civic spaces that are fronting onto the Civic Park, as well as private spaces with the residential in the orange here. You're also probably noticing that the structured parking is integrated into it. It's really all this mix of uses that creates a very active and lively master plan, which is very pedestrian friendly and supports the active open space of both the Civic Park, the Civic Plaza, and the Main Street. Now I'd like to share a little bit about the phasing that we have. What we're looking at here is Phase 1. And in Phase 1, it's really important that we get some key elements established. And, of course, the key elements in this case are the City Hall and the library, as well as the Civic Plaza and Main Street, naturally. As we move into Phase 2, we see the development of really the core, the heart of the community, which is that Civic Plaza and City Hall, by the establishment of the retail and office framing either side and completing the retail road. In Phase 3, we begin to see the establishment of the Civic Park with the addition of the parcels to the north and west, the multi-generational center, and the residential, continuing to establish these great open spaces with a mix of uses that creates a very active environment. Going into Phase 4, we see that there's some additional residential and office that starts to, again, frame the civic park and the introduction of the Performing Arts Center. In Phase 5, we see the office and retail sort of completing the picture, and the City Hall expansion. It should be noted that the City Hall expansion could happen at whatever phase that makes sense. It's just where we happen to put it at this point in time. I'd like to now sort of move into where we're at right now, which is Phase 1. And Phase 1, as I mentioned, encompasses the library and the City Hall. That the most important pieces start to become established in the city core, and that being the Civic Plaza, which feeds into the City Hall. The retail drive, which, as Ray was mentioning, becomes not only a feeder for the retail that will encompass there at other phases in Phase 2, but it also creates an active, larger potential active space for even larger events. Establishment of the formal entry plaza and that view diagonal that we were talking about, as well as some temporary gathering space as a result of sort of the way the parking has been allocated to create these smaller pockets of parking, which allows us to have some additional gathering space, creates a sort of staging, a sort of preview of what the larger park space will be in the future, and the ability to have venues that could be similar to nature that might go into the civic park. The main street would be established along with the streets and sidewalks, so they've got a real strong character that is starting to be established in Phase 1. To get to the idea of where the entries are, this diagram talks about where the surface parking lots are at and how they're accessed, and you can see by the green arrows that the green arrows indicate how one would get into the temporary surface parking lots. The magenta dots illustrate the path of travel from the surface parking lots into the main entries. And additionally, you can start to see the main entries outlined as in yellow. You can also start to see in blue, which might be a little harder to see, but there's accessible parking has been noted adjacent to the entries. And additionally, we've looked very strongly at the idea of accessible parking along Main Street because of its direct connection with the entries, which we think would be a nice addition, a nice approach to this. This diagram talks a little bit about the service access to the library as well as to the City Hall, which are the red arrows that you're seeing, and then potential loading areas that you can see off of Main Street and off of the Civic Plaza. One thing I did want to mention is that the surface parking is a temporary phasing, and that it would be landscaped. And in fact, our intent is to use landscaping that could be reused in the future. So we use certain plant species that we wouldn't necessarily have to destroy, but we could actually reuse, which would make a lot of sense. So that's part of our planning as we move forward with those temporary lots. The City Hall, as you're seeing here, is a mass model of the City Hall. What you're seeing is a 4-story building of about 110,000 square foot, of which 70,000 square foot would be for the City Hall, which leaves about 40,000 square foot for expansion into the future. There is also potential for retail that we're exploring at the ground floor to help activate the plaza. Some of the things we just talk about as far as the form that you're starting to see here, I think, let's see if I can get this going. There we go. We have a curved Main Street which is coming along here, which is starting to establish the one edge of the building and really creating a front. The diagonal, which is flowing through, establishing the other side of the City Hall, as well as the retail drive, establishing the south end of the City Hall. The City Council chambers itself would be a 1 to 2 story structure, a very iconic piece that, as Ray mentioned, would have separate entry accessibility going on, but really creating a sense of identity and iconography for the City Hall, particularly as it's located along the diagonal. With a future expansion, whenever that may occur, there is planning for 5 to 6 stories, which would give an additional 95,000 square foot, which would include retail at the ground floor as well as civic uses on the ground floor and above, for a total of about 205 square foot. I should mention at this point that we are seeking LEED certification on this project, so we are intending to employ green strategies and create a high-performance, sustainable building both on this project and the library. The library is a one-story structure, and we have about 30,000 square foot of the building. And it should be noted that even though it's one story, there will be some really nice volumes of space that will give it a stronger presence and a stronger attitude along a stronger feel and sort of symbolism along the main street. And we have the potential, should become something that you desire, is that we could have the ability to expand should the university and the city decide to require some additional space for perhaps a joint use in the future. Now I'd like to give you a quick update on the programming efforts that we've gone to. As you all know, or may have known, that we started our programming back in October, and we had a number of interviews with the department head and staff. We created 2 rounds of draft programs and verifications with follow-ups with input from the department heads, and finally produced a final draft program on December 19th of 2008 with the City of Goodyear staff concurrence. Since then, the development team has moved forward into schematic design based upon these documents, so we're moving forward. The office and space standards, we did a comparison. We developed office and space standard comparisons between several government facility and private company as-built space standards as benchmark for the City of Goodyear. And as a result of that, we created some space efficiencies sort of across the board. So we had some really good successes with the definition of that. The square footage, we're looking at a goal of 70,000 gross square foot for the Phase 1 build-out within the 110,000 square foot City Hall. And then finally, I'd like to start talking about the stacking diagrams. We've done a couple of initial diagrams, and we've looked at 2 different options. Option 1, as you're seeing on the left-hand side there, is looking at an expansion space which is dispersed, and we're looking at the first floor plan, which they both look the same, which it's no coincidence because there's a lot of stuff that goes on the first floor. But option 2 on the right-hand side is looking at a more consolidated approach to expansion area, and we'll see that as we get most particularly into the third floor. This would be the second floor. You can see that they're fairly similar in area, with the option 1 having a little bit more expansion area than option 2. As we move into floor 3, you can see that option 2 has a whole floor that has been established for expansion area. So it's really consolidated that area onto one floor, as opposed to option 1, which has a little bit more dispersed. And then finally moving up to the 4th floor, where you can see it's fairly similar, option 2 having a little less than option 1. We think that there's some advantages to going with option number 2. It creates some great opportunities, whether it be expansion or potential short-term tenant lease, that this would be a good option to proceed with for both the city, for the city. And now I'd like to give a little bit of update on the library. Just quickly, a note that we've been meeting with both the Maricopa County as well as the university and get some input from those folks on where we've been at. In fact, we just had a meeting last week with Maricopa, and we've got some good input. I think that we're making some good strides and look forward to continuing those conversations with those folks as well in the future here. I'd like to move into a little bit of the layout space and give you a sense of where we're at, in a similar fashion to the City Hall. We've got some block diagrams that start to get at the nature of how the space is being planned out. And in this case, we've been a little bit more descriptive about the areas. The entry that we're seeing here in green, focusing on Main Street, which has a strong retail component to it. And this green space has a cafe, Friends of the Library bookstore, and perhaps some media type of CDs and DVDs that would be associated with a more retail approach to libraries. To the north side, we've got some wonderful glazed areas that look towards the north and get great north light coming in, as well as some landscape views that would have the public stacks in, as well as a children's library down below that, and the staff and service area, which is fronting off to the sort of more or less an access along street access along here, which would create a great opportunity for service for the library. And now with that, I'd just like to say thank you very much for your time. It's been a privilege to be here, and we look forward to being a partner in creating a fantastic space that furthers the vision that has been put forth by the master plan for us. So thank you.
Thank you. Opportunity for comment. Want to start in the right? Councilmember Holland?
I noticed that the architecture, just looking at it, I know you didn't go into any detail tonight, but it looks very ultra-modern, kind of winged-like. I see you smiling, so you know what I'm talking about. I assume that when you get ready to show us the true architecture instead of just the diagrams about what it looks, what you think it might look like, you're planning on using some real natural-looking colors. Okay, so we're on the right.
Absolutely.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah, what you're seeing there is a very simple massing, and certainly our intent is to create a project that has a civic feel to it and using warm materials that are indicative of the environment that we're in. Even to, we've got the SAP that we're dealing with, but even regardless of that, I think it just makes sense to use those sorts of materials, stones, bricks, those sorts of, that will give you that sort of desert feel to it.
Okay.
Yeah.
The other thing, too, is from the library perspective, are you also designing it so it will be able to go up in stories in case we need it, or is this one just going to always be a one-story building, and where would you put the computer section? Because you had a stacks and reading area. And I know nowadays it's almost all, people go to the library and they want to make sure that they have access. So how would you look at that?
That's a good question. And we visited the Queen Creek Library, and one of the things we noticed was that a lot of the computers are dispersed. So rather than having in one place, they actually disperse them throughout the library. So there's they're integrated into the fabric of the library. Mm-hmm. So that would be the intent here as well.
Okay, understand. Thank you.
Councilmember Cavalier?
Yes. Nice presentation, by the way. I can see the possibilities for all these different things Gordon and I were talking about earlier, and it all comes to life now. It's great. The City Hall was designed for 4 stories, right? Four floors. And then and the open space around this is, the Arroyo is just a walking area. It's not
Correct, yes.
for any other, it's just pedestrian.
Yes.
Okay, so those are some of the, and then on the retail, have you done enough research on that retail to know what really ought to go in there, and what would be the kind of retail that would fit in the educational environment and the city municipal environment? I mean, has that been done? Have you got any idea how that will play out?
Well, yes, we have. As a matter of fact, I wanted to comment to the council and the mayor that, we've spent a lot of time with the master planning, and a lot of that does have to do not only with City Hall and the library, but with inside the Main Street, that whole concept of how we react to the civic space that's plaza space and landscape space, and the shape of the buildings that we propose to build as our private developments in City Hall. It was all quite complicated and quite a I think a very interesting result, because our whole private development theme is mixed use, to be sure that we have uses in the project that are 24 hours a day, 7 days a week kind of uses. And And the more we thought through the plan and the phasing, it occurred to us that, one, we're not talking about big box retail here, obviously. There's plenty of that. We're definitely talking about uses in the retail that serve the civic public and the surrounding neighborhoods. But on the other hand, we do, in looking at the neighborhoods and the markets around this site, we think we're going to be creating a very special place here. We really do. We think it's a very unique opportunity with the civic component, the master planning that we're doing with you guys, the fairly intense amount of park and open space. I mean, we really are going to create a place. So we're not being grandiose in our sites for retail, but we're also not stopping too short either on thinking that we could create a place that named restaurants want to be. I mean, we've got educational institutions right north. We've got the civic activities. We've got quite a bit of our own office that we intend to put in, and quite a bit of residential. So, we're trying to do this in a way that we design the spaces for generally smaller retailers. But as Gordon can point out, if we go back to the plan, you'll see that the ends of our two segments of retail in our first two projects are larger spaces. Can we turn that back on?
Yeah, I think you got to turn it back
Because the
on.
reason I asked that is more than what do we need in that space, but how will the rest of the other three quadrants fit into this? And we need to communicate with the owners of the other three quadrants, because at times I get the feeling when I speak to them that they think we're trying to do something in city center that is competing with them. And I try to tell them, no, we're not. The retail that's coming in there is going to be the service type retail for a municipal area and the university and the educational area and the entertainment area. So you've got a different kind of thing there. And I just want to make certain that our neighbors in the other three quadrants are communicating with you and that this communication is going on so that we don't get badgered with this, because I'm getting this all the time.
Right.
And I'm saying, no, guys, it's not that kind of thing. And
Right.
I think what you see there, you'll be able to put your hotels or convention centers or whatever you're trying to do in these other quadrants. They'll fit in very well. And I think, don't change your plans. Let's sit down and talk. Let's communicate. And I think that's where you have to come into this picture for us.
Well, and we'd be glad to. And I think, again, the more we think about the plan, we are talking about smaller retail spaces. We've got a pretty good amount of retail space in total, but they're smaller spaces. And on the ends of those two private parcels that flank the city hall, we'll have some larger spaces. It could be restaurants.
But not big box, but you're
No,
talking
no,
about
absolutely.
large retail space. That was my concern.
Right.
No, otherwise, I think it's going very well, and I'm very pleased with what
And we're very pleased with the idea. I think I can credit Gordon with this one, of that internal retail street. I think that was a great move to give us a way to really invigorate
Yes.
the center of the project, and at the same time create opportunities for civic activities. We can close down the street if necessary for civic activities, but it also gives us a place to have this kind of this retail energy. So we're quite pleased with where we are on that.
Thank you.
Vice Mayor?
Okay, so I'm not mistaken, the retail drive is new?
Yes, it is.
Okay,
Yes, it is.
I just wanted to
It
make
is.
sure. I was trying to recollect from the last plans we had seen. So, I think it's a good idea. I think, maybe I missed this while you were talking. I was writing notes and listening at the same time. But the treatment of that space then would be upgraded from just a traditional asphalt. Did you say that during the presentation?
Yes, I did say that. Yeah, I mean, that road is really part of the paving that would happen along the city hall. So it's a contiguous type of surface that is not broken up by a curb and gutter and asphalt. So it's meant to be really a civic space.
Actually, if you could, it's in a way, it's a trafficked street. It's one way, which means it's slightly narrower than it might otherwise be, but it still has plenty of room. But its texture in terms of what you might be walking on is different than a street might be.
Right.
And the indicators visually are that it's almost a pedestrian place that cars are allowed to enter as opposed to a car place that pedestrians are allowed to enter. You see what I'm saying? It's a slight shift in emphasis, but the idea is that it is a collected space that can be used by pedestrians that cars have simple access through on a traffic calming basis, meaning we slow them down to get them through the space. And there is some parking in there, but not a majority of parking, just to enliven the street front.
This is the space, isn't it, that you envision no curb?
Yes.
Have bollards?
Yes, if you can imagine, I don't know if you are familiar with the term rolled curbs, but rolled curbs are, it's the idea that one material is used for the street and it's very gently rolled up so you don't have the strict vertical edges of a curb, so it feels more gentle, but still defines the street, which has to be done at some level.
That's good.
Yeah, just a couple thoughts. I mean, in terms of the treatment of the closure materials, make it maybe something that can go in that is decorative, that looks like it's part of the environment, not a bunch of street cones that Streets has to bring out every time. You know, I'm familiar with the stuff in D.C. I mean, you walk by a lot of the parking garages, you just have the bollard that goes up and it's there and it blocks traffic and you're done with it. You don't have to put all this other stuff in there. It says street closed. Other than,
It's a great
other than
idea.
us having
Yeah.
cones kind of littered out throughout
Sure,
the place.
that's a
and
great
closing it
idea.
down. So,
Yeah, we can have something that is integrated as part of the road
No, I mean, I'm
that
thinking-
lifts up or something.
I'm thinking maybe even that
That's a
it
good
seems like
idea.
it's a street that quite often on a regular basis we may or may not close depending on what's going on in the council chambers, depending on what's going on in terms of events. And so make sure that treatment is temporarily permanent. If
Yeah.
that makes sense.
Good point,
That's
yes.
good.
Yes.
That's good.
The parking ingress and egress into the garages ultimately, is that off Estrella and Van Buren?
It's
Am
off
I
of,
looking at that correctly?
it's off of Estrella and Yuma.
Or, I mean, pardon me, my mistake, Yuma.
Yeah, it's for the different parcels. For parcels A and B would be off of, well, say B and C would be off of Yuma.
Okay.
A and H would be off Estrella, and then the remaining parcels around Goodyear generally be off of Goodyear, with I think the exception of maybe D.
Since he asked that question, could you talk about the exterior of that parking?
The exterior of the parking, as I was talking about, is integrated into the architecture. So it doesn't feel like a parking garage. It looks and feels like a real building and has real materials. So it'll have the architectural treatment of the rest of the site around it. It's a good question.
You know, as we're presenting things, and I hope I'm not pointing out something that's too late or too little too late here in the process, but I'm familiar because I work right across the street from, or a couple blocks from Arizona Center. And I'm sure most of us in the Valley are familiar with Arizona Center downtown, APS, and they've got a small retail environment. And one of the things that I hear oftentimes about that center that was a disaster is it was not open to the street. And that the failure of that, I shouldn't say it's a failure. I mean, they've redeveloped themselves, and now they have, I mean, you may or may not be familiar with the whole upstairs that used to be the cafeteria kind of environment, food court type thing, is now, I think, EDA, the architect. They've got their architecture group that's turned that space into an architecture firm. And so it's gone through this evolution, but from what I've heard in some of the retailers inside of that is that there's that loss, that disconnect from the drive-by. And so as we go about doing this, I don't know, I mean, I'm sure we're not too late. We're not coming out of the ground. Give some thought to you know, how am I going to know that there's a cafe on the interior of that site from the drive-by? Because, I mean, you guys know this here in the retail environment, but as I look at it, I think it's very similar in nature to Arizona Center in terms of the layout, the design, the phasing, what's happening, what's not happening, and that sort of thing, and even some of the curvilinear nature of the walkway, if you think. Is everybody familiar with Arizona Center, where I'm talking? If you walk from the APS building or over by kind of the northeast side of that, you make this curve all the way around from, say, pardon the benchmarks here, but Cold Stone Creamery all the way around to Starbucks. The latter I frequent more often than the first, but it makes that same kind of curve where you've got that pedestrian environment that would be similar to us on this street
Right.
that allows, or this pedestrian environment that allows cars. I think we get away from that with the cars being allowed through there on a regular basis, but if you haven't walked through there, walk through it, because I just don't want to. And I think that view corridor from the intersection into that environment is going to be vitally important to us. So let's make sure we don't end up with a 10-foot or 20-foot
Right.
little narrow hallway.
Yes, totally agree.
So, anyway, I think that was it. I mean, I like what I'm seeing. I like the progression that we're making, and it's exciting to see this stuff come to fruition. Oftentimes we get stuck on only each and every one of us saying one thing, but I'd echo some of the things Brenda said in terms of expansion for the library. Let's make sure we don't limit that from just to a one-story. If for some reason we figure out that we need to add on to that.
So are you
expand
saying the
that.
roof has to be load-bearing? Because that's what it
Well,
has to be.
I don't know if it's,
We have
I
to-
don't
the
know. I
construction
don't know if
has
it's
to be totally
load-bearing,
different.
I don't know if it's out the sides or what, but
It's
as you're designing that, I mean, I don't want to go to great extra expense if we're never going to put a second story on that thing.
Right.
But if the reality is that, it's going to go from 30
I can
to
tell you,
40,
Rob, I've worked in 4 different places with load bearings built in to expand.
and they've never expanded.
Never happens,
Okay,
yeah.
well,
That tends to be the rule, but the idea of expanding, to your point, is something that we do have under consideration. We want to do it economically and logically and that sort of thing, so we'll keep that in mind and bring it back to you as well.
Good, thank you.
One thing I did want to point out, I think I had mentioned in the presentation, is that we do have space for potential expansion, laterally, if you will. So there is some
Right.
potential for expansion out to the sides.
Okay, Councilmember Osborne?
Thank you. Actually, Rob and I were really on the same wavelength with the Arizona Center thought there. That's what I envision. With my other full-time job, I am a retailer. And looking at the setup, first of all, I was thinking, okay, how are we going to be addressing signage? And especially along Estrella, and Yuma, how is the signage going to be? There's the lure of, it's a very vibrant mix that you have. As a retailer, why do I want to be in the center? And the lure of all of that is there. What is my signage? Okay, how am I going to be exposed? And Rob brings up a very valid point. How are we going to keep it that way and people knowing that it's there? So I just wanted to bring that up.
On that point, excuse me,
Uh-huh.
I think, and it was mentioned just a moment ago, the opening at Australia and Yuma, we really intend to celebrate that. We've got to be sure that that's significant, and Gordon and I just talked today about maybe even getting it wider of a
Right.
throat, because visually, that's a lot of cars will go by that intersection. We want to be able to have them be able to see not only that there's a plaza and there's activity there, but you can see the people, you can see the cars, and that in itself, and if we put a couple of our signature restaurants on the corners, that'll bring people to recognize that. So that's a part of what the signage is, but the signage itself along Australia, and we've got some work to do to make sure that that's done properly.
Exactly.
And tastefully, but at the same time, as I'm sure you would agree, it's not just the signage. People have to see that there's activity in there, and that's extremely important to how we develop this plan.
can I tack on, the back of the house treatment? I mean, you're essentially going to focus the retail inside, but if you look at McDowell and Dysart, we've got a similar environment where we've got the Einstein's Bagels and a small restaurant opened up on this corner, and then the rest of the building is kind of
Blank.
They apparently tried to make it look like it's a building on the exterior, but it's back of the house and it's covered with wrought iron and bougainvillea from the back to cover those doors that folks bring the trash in and out of. And that's against our street, so it was a good effort. But I don't want to lose sight that this is our parkway. This is our city
Well, I
center.
think Verado did a much better job than that. If you look at if you go
Yeah.
into Verado and look, and you go around to the back of those buildings, I think the example of how well it can be done, they did it. And I think we kind of missed a little bit.
Got to have a hospitable environment for
Yeah.
the individual.
It almost has to look as
be-
good on the back as
Almost
the front.
does.
Yeah, it does.
It's almost got to be the ability to walk through it to some
It's amazing how many projects you see here and in San Diego that somehow that they face the street with the worst side.
Right.
But Gordon, you and I have talked about how the corners can wrap around
Right.
really quite actively. In the middle,
What-
there
what-
could be some part of it that's covering up.
Exactly, yeah. I think if you look at these corners, the idea is that these are probably, you can see even the way they're drawn, they tend to be larger retailers, let's say there, larger retailers there. And the idea is that this space, as well as this, as well as this, as well as this, can be containers for the retailer. Now, in some instances, because of back-of-house issues, we may be treating some piece of this differently, but it can still feel as though it's in composition with the balance of it. And then those larger anchors, of course, are the draws for the smaller folks, we hope, on the inside. The other part of this, I would say, is the thing that we've recognized with this, and the reason we thought the retail street might be important is, at the end of the day, we see this as needing to be destination-based, if you understand what I mean. It's the kind of place you go because you've either had so much fun there, or it's so memorable, or both, preferably, that you're naturally attracted. That doesn't help the first-time user, to your point. So it needs to be great all the time. But we really see this as a draw of a place, to Frank's point, that isn't the same as the other retailers are in town. So we're very focused on the issues you're talking about. We haven't quite solved them yet, to your point, but we're going to bring them back to you. So.
Another question. During Phase 1 that you showed the gathering spaces, I'm not sure how large those gathering spaces are, but how are you going to be treating that surface? Is this going to be turf? Is this going to be something like that? Depending again on how large that is this a place for an opportunity to test drive that fake turf? Is this, something that if it's working well, and as you said, we want to reuse things, can we move it to another area? So I wanted to bring that up. And I am sorry, I guess I have forgotten what we had discussed, but in every justice facility, chamber, we've had this dual usage. We keep calling this the council chambers. We're not having the justice facility dual usage, right? Okay, so remind me again, is it staying here?
Yes, it is. Temporarily, I mean.
Okay, but, so where is it going?
We don't know.
We don't know, okay.
But it is not going to be part of this.
So it could be expansion of City
It will probably
Hall?
be part of the public safety building.
Could be for the administration building.
Oh, okay, I just couldn't remember, okay.
Yeah, you don't want that over there.
Alrighty.
No.
Okay, thank you.
Councilmember Lord?
Thank you. Well, I can't even begin to tell you how excited I am. It's been a long time coming and a lot of hard work and a lot of citizens that put a lot of input into this. They really did. And so this is their building too in their quadrant. A lot of questions were already answered. The street materials was very important to me. I love Rob's idea about a permanent, the gating,
right.
bring them out of the ground and up.
Right.
So that's good. And I like the library location more than ever. Can you tell me how far it is from the universities to the library, through that walk? Can you just kind of an estimate?
I'm going to say 600 feet.
600 feet. So that is a better connectivity than we had
It is
before.
much better, I think.
So-
And it's also on an axis that's much more direct. So
Yeah,
I
so
think that was a good
that's
suggestion.
very pleasing, and I'm sure the universities will be happy to hear that.
That was your idea, so thank you.
Yeah, you're welcome.
Influenced by the universities.
You're welcome on that. I had one more question, now it's gone, let me think. I got to the streets and the library location. On the library, on the extension, I would hope, we're going to be a large city, and I can't imagine this library being the library, the only place for citizens to go. So I'm assuming that we will have library extensions eventually throughout the city. I think about, our people south, we're going to need something. So I don't know if it's really necessary for us to worry about a two-story at this time. I think that we would be better served of placing that facility in their neighborhoods closer to the people. So that doesn't concern me. On architecture, this is really not the night we were going to talk about that. This is placement. And I guess when you show placement, it's extremely modern. So the people that are a little edgy tonight, that they don't see they're going to get anything that has a warm feel to it, I believe it will come. But I'm just pleased. Thank you so much. I know what I did. Sorry, there, I remembered it. Parking. It concerns me somewhat that this will be built, and so we drive down the street, and we're going to round that corner, and all we see are cars parked all around the building. I still have not heard any conversation of a parking built below the city civic center, civic hall. or one of the first buildings that you're going to build would be a parking complex with retail below it, and some parking above it. I'm throwing that out to you. Does anybody else on the council feel anything about the parking, or are you happy with driving up to with parking all around it and the field?
I was concerned there wasn't enough. I mean, we look at it and you see all these blocks that say parking, but when you were talking about people visiting the area, and especially if are they planning on staying there all day, or are they just going to be in and out and, kind of a stop and shop type thing? So I was just concerned that there wasn't enough, but.
And protective parking also.
Yeah, that's good.
The council chambers will be there for a while before some of those other buildings are there. Do we have some kind of protective parking, or it's just something to look into?
Well,
Protected parking.
Well, I think in terms of, parking underneath the building, we have looked at different scenarios, and we have passed it on to the development team to look at, and they vary. They vary from doing a full build parking underneath City Hall. We can get about 40 spaces. We looked at doing half of that and getting about half the spaces. And we looked at doing a secure parking area next to the phase one of the City Hall. So right next to, in this area, do secure parking with a secure connection to the City Hall. So we are looking at those issues. And they're in the works right now.
Thank you.
and I think on the comment Councilman Lord you made about a sea of parking, there is a lot of surface parking, and our goal is to get our own private development started as soon as we can, given the market conditions, in order to structure up. In order to structure up some of that parking. So, believe me, we're anxious to get going and to start solving the problem of too much surface parking.
And if I may, part of our approach to this particular scheme was trying to disperse the parking, because there is a lot of surface parking, and make it such that there were smaller pieces rather than larger expanses of pieces more closely located to it, so that it wasn't a big, long parking lot, but it really sort of becomes pockets of parking that are scattered throughout as a way to mitigate the issue of a lot of surface parking.
And just one other thing, to answer your question, Joanne, I was thinking about you saying, about the retailer and how do they know I'm there. I'd venture to say, if we're going into this project, it's a duty of the city that we will have to make sure that we inspire that activity and that we produce some of that activity. And we are constantly having things going on in our city, and we will have to have there'll be a department. Where's Paula? It'll be Paula.
For marketing.
Yeah, for marketing. That will have to be marketed 24 hours a day. That's how you make it successful.
Oh,
So,
I want a freeway pylon sign.
You call that a lollipop?
So we'll
I
have
was
that
joking.
responsibility. You probably will still be around, so you can be part of that responsibility.
Councilmember Souza.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. When we first got into this project, we were talking about the southeast corner, opening that up so you could see the white tanks, or straight up. Has that been approached at all?
The southeast corner of this development, so we can.
Opening it up, this one leg. We talked about, that it's wide enough so that it could accommodate a view of the white tanks.
Can I interrupt in there?
Yeah, go ahead.
We did,
60 feet.
but we went out and we, all right, help me the term we stood on that corner and drew those lines to see how we could see the white tanks and the Estrellas. And we came to the determination it was impossible. Maybe the white tanks for some of those buildings behind, but if on that quadrant, if you stand there with a compass and you go, you do not see them. You just do not, with the additional buildings that will be built around in that quadrant. And so that, we really dispersed with that, just because we came to the realization as a group that it just, as much as that poetically sounds wonderful, it just doesn't work.
Well, Councilman Souza, I would also say, too, the dimension, these plans are probably a little bit difficult to read in terms of scale, or at least they are for us. that dimension that you're looking at, that slot, that looks like a slot currently, is 60 feet, plus or minus, right now, which I was just counting tiles. That's how we measure things as architects. We count ceiling tiles. So if you count ceiling tiles, you'll see that 60 feet is about the dimension of half again the room past that movable wall. That's the dimension that we're talking about, plus or minus. I'm sure it's not completely accurate. To your point, however, one of the things that we thought about with the Civic Center itself, the City Hall building, was that its placement in some ways is going to make it even more prominent, I think, relative to that view. So a lot of the City Hall's view corridor is literally at the mountains, and you can see it from there.
See?
Yeah, well, from there you can, but from the corner you can't see it. It's true. Both of you are right. The idea is that.
Why aren't you diplomatic?
Well, at the council, my wife doesn't say that, but the Civic Center is at that point on mark for a great view. We think we can take advantage of. So.
At this time.
Right now, yeah, sure.
I just want to, when you get the other quadrants up there, now we have to talk about it.
I like the way you use the approach on the traffic flow throughout the entire complex. I think it's excellent. You're able to reach without difficulty all the buildings within the complex itself, and that's important. Traffic flow is certainly important. I'm going to throw one thing out to you, and I hope it's a yes. We hear so much about solar energy today. Everywhere any newspaper you pick up, any magazine, I mean, there are ads in there about solar energy. And, of course, APS is pitching it as well. Have we thought about solar energy in these buildings?
I mean, yeah, I think it's in today's climate, you have to think about that, especially as architects. And I think on this project, and when we come back to you, especially for the City Hall, you will see how our intent is to be ecologically responsible, but also harness the sun energy and to be able to use that to make it a better building. Some of the massing that you see right now on that diagram there, even the simple green boxes that are facing south begin to offer the possibility for photovoltaics integrated into that roofing system. The City Hall as well, our approach is that let's be sustainable. Whatever moves we make architecturally, aesthetically, should be ones that are driven by aesthetic issues to do with what's the word? The environment, yes. So in terms of solar gain, being smart about the way we treat the building is really important. So looking at photovoltaics in the roof is part of what we are looking at as well.
Very good. Thank you. Thank you. I want to compliment all of you on the way you made your presentation. It's excellent. And let's go. Let's start digging.
Thank you. Thank you.
We're ready.
Yeah. Right?
Good question.
It is a good question.
Okay, thank you. Just a couple questions. How does a retailer seek out a space here? If it were Evergreen Devco developing this, they'd go to Evergreen Devco or their broker. What do they do? This government owns this one. So, what do they seek out?
You mean in the space, Mayor, that's in the City Hall building?
And all the retail. In the office.
Well, we will launch a major campaign, starting by a branding and marketing firm that we're considering hiring. And then whenever we do a development ourselves and own the development, which we will here, subject to your ground lease, you will have our folks and agents working on our behalf, brokers. And in this case, we've commissioned a retail consultant to work along with our brokers that we're talking to about how the retail spaces lay out. But it'll be a traditional, I use that word, at least in our business, the way we've done it, traditional landlord, developer working closely with our broker, working closely with a tenant's broker. So, but we're not there yet, but we are taking great advantage of some very smart retail guys that know what tenants we should be thinking about and how these spaces ought to lay out, and that's what's informed our layout so far.
And is some of it, I mean, as much work as you can do, a lot of it's market-driven.
Yes.
I mean, we can have a wish list a mile high, but in the end, it depends on what the market's doing at that time. I think we're protected by our list of things we say we do not want in that city center. So,
Yeah, I'm looking at it from the perspective of the person who he's entrepreneurial, he wants to be in here. Is there going to be a sign out there for your broker? And that broker will come to you, and then are you coming, then we have to make the final decision because we're the property owner.
As long as we don't violate the list. You don't have to get involved in that, as long as we, again, lease to tenants that are appropriate tenants and not on the bad list.
You have more authority than I thought you did.
but Mayor, can I ask this question? Do we really want to be in the leasing business? Do we as a city really want to have that responsibility? In my view, I'd say no. I'd say that's not where we want to be. We want the people that know what they're doing, and you've been in real estate, and I've been in real estate, but I certainly would be an expert on making sure we have the right retailer in there.
Yeah, as the owner, I always want to be involved.
The one way that we may be
I am the
involved
owner.
is the space in City Hall. If the third floor, if we follow option B, for example, and we have the third floor available to lease, that as the owner, we would be very much involved in. If the 4,000 square feet of retail is added to the downstairs, obviously we would be involved in that also.
Sure.
But
in the
the
City
rest
Hall.
of it is by contract theirs.
Yeah, that's what we agreed to, at least that's why we went through that.
And quite frankly, that's in our best interest.
I
mean,
agree.
Their success is going to be driven by their ability to lease this out.
Okay.
Then, who would be responsible for maintaining the building itself?
They are.
We would.
We had that I think you discussed that
Yeah.
last time with us.
Yeah, again, on our developments, Councilman, we not only have our asset and property leasing folks, but we have property management. In this case, because it's in Arizona, we would joint venture that with a local property management firm working with our guys in San Diego. But we would maintain and manage all of our properties. And in fact, and Mary can talk about this, there'll be a management of the overall property itself that we can help in terms of landscape maintenance and kind of the homeowners, if you will, the homeowners or owners group that we will be heavily involved in. But as will you. I mean, you guys are property owners with your buildings, and we're property owners with the ones that we own. So we'll form a homeowners group, essentially. I guess we can owners.
Yeah.
Business
I don't
owners,
know that
a business owner, it's not called that, a leasing organization.
There will be
Mayor, wouldn't it be
some
something like
seminars would be-
what we have with Estrella Mountain Ranch? They do the land, the city owns the right-of-way, and the city's responsible for the landscaping and the cleanup and everything on the right-of-way of Estrella Parkway. And they do that in conjunction with that which Newland owns.
Right.
We use the same company, and the city pays their part, and then the company pays their part. And it's all one, so it's all within one.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. I think there's a lot of reason to think about it that way. But there's a lot of this property that will be not city right-of-way.
Right.
And so we'll end up working closely with your folks and your contractors on the part of the parcels that we maintain.
Right.
Okay, another subject, I'm really concerned this connection to the other corners, and I know that wasn't part of your task. You weren't chartered to do that. But the connection to these other corners is so unclear right now that I think in 10 or 15 years, there's going to be a lot of regret around here that it wasn't done well. And I don't know if that's a staff function or we should have assigned that to you, but we've got a void out there. This city center is 4 corners, and we're moving on 1. So I'm worried about that.
Mr. Mayor, if I could just for a second, we are going to be meeting with Steve Reneker and Todd Tupper and the representatives and our representatives to make sure that all of this does work together. So that is being taken care of.
I agree with him, the mayor, excuse me, Mayor. I totally agree with him, because we have made, I don't know if there's changes, but I think we've integrated some other things into this civic quadrant. Maybe not, to a higher degree than we had anticipated before. So I do think, in all fairness, that we need to bring them in, and I don't know what it's going to take. It may take changing those quadrants a little bit and making different allowances that we didn't make before for them. So I do think we have to be very sympathetic and to them and helpful to them, because I agree with the mayor. It's 4 quadrants, and eventually that's going to be the success, that it's all going to work together. So I support your statement, Mayor.
Well, I was talking to Reniker last week, and this subject came up, and he brought it up. It was a concern he had. You guys are going ahead. That's why I mentioned this earlier. What about us? We've got to be a part of this. You're 1/4 of this entire corner, and we're the other 3/4, and you haven't brought us into this. And I said, well, we need to do that. The city needs to step up and get this going if we haven't. And I said, I'll check on it to see where we are.
Well,
And I think it's the city's responsibility to coordinate that with you so that you can sit down with them and they can hear your story, and then we can hear their story, or you can hear their story, and so we can put this all together. And I think the city has to pretty much
And we're certainly
coordinate
going to do that, Mr. Cavalier, but you have to appreciate who we're dealing with also.
Well, I understand, but I'm just saying, this was a story I got from
Yeah, but
Steve last
Frank,
week.
they've got to come to the table, and I respect the entity that owns the quadrants, but they've got to get realistic, come to the table. Are they going to develop it, or are they going to turn it over? Are they going to just sell it and go off? They've said no, that they would like to develop, and they're not developers, but they've said they want to develop it. Okay, if that's the case, then let's sit down and we'll work this out. But at this point, there hasn't been anything that they've come to the table on.
Well, I appreciate that, and we have had discussions with them. We met with them some months ago. In several senses, we are going to be competitive with them. We're going to have some products that are going to compete with them.
But you can't build a city and not be competitive with the different
Absolutely.
parts of the city.
So, we can chat with them and meet with them, tell them what we're doing, listen to what they're doing. But, we each have our own kind of plate, and we've got our own relationship with the zoning and the entitlements we've got.
See, I think that's the problem. I think what's happened, we've changed their plate. And so they're in a dilemma too, because let's face it, everybody, the developers, you're in to make some money and have a successful, have a business. And so we've changed the look of their quadrant. So I understand how perplexed they must be. And we've told them what they can and cannot develop. Well, maybe that's not quite working now. Maybe we have to come to the table and make some changes in those quadrants. I don't know.
But it sounded like John said that it's
But
in his
John,
corner,
but
so.
cooperation, and I think we are. I think we will be. I don't have
We
any
are
doubt.
already, and we will be certainly in the
Yeah.
future.
One last little bit, that if we ever have those pedestrian bridges or tunnels, we're going to have to be talking to the other 3, so I just wanted to add that.
Are we talking more than just pedestrian? I mean, I assume we're talking more than just pedestrian connectivity, right, Mayor? I mean, you're talking.
Oh, yeah, the whole
mix.
thing.
The whole thing, yeah.
I mean, I think.
Yeah.
Everything.
I mean,
No, I figured he
I
was.
I respect both sides of this. I mean, I
Architectural
think-
design, the whole thing.
I think, I think we've got a responsibility. We've got 40 acres of land, which we've ground leased to these folks for quite a while, and we've got a responsibility to taxpayer to make this as profitable as possible for the city as the owner. At the same time as we've got to respect the developments around us and realize that maybe we have had some game-changing environment and need to do that. That said, I respect the fact that we'll probably have 8.5 magnitude earthquakes at this corner and intersection before Steve Reniker is happy. But 100% happy. I mean, I think it's, there's going to be a lot of give and take back and forth. I appreciate the mayor's remarks, but I'm understanding of both sides of the equation here.
I haven't made any point as far as a position. All I'm saying is, we got a way to go to bring this together. This is not integrated. And it's not, I don't know whose issue it is. It may be the city manager's. But somebody has to bring this together, and I know he's already working it. And no doubt, the other landowner has to get vigorous in this issue.
I just don't want the the other owner to prevent us from getting on with it, you know, and that's where
That's
it
not gonna
gets
happen.
sticky. So I mean, we've made some decisions here.
That's not going to happen,
Okay,
Georgia, really.
so just, you know.
You know, another issue here is we're also competing with the same uses for the ballpark area. Office, retail, right down the street. So I think there's a lack of integration. There's not a synthesis here that's obvious to me anyway, and there has to be. So this is, and that, I don't know whose job this is, but I guess we're responsible. So, not I
would say
guess,
yes,
I
we
know.
We kind of recruited these people. I guess we are responsible for baseball and.
Maybe Langford should take this on. I don't know, but somebody needs to staff that.
And I didn't mean to infer that the city had not taken that step. I was just saying that we have got to do something, or someone has to bring them together, because I don't know, it's very difficult to understand exactly what they're waiting for, or what they want, or what they want the city to do.
Yes, it
because
is.
Well, it is. I just talked to another developer tonight that says that they have the same problems, so it's not just us, so.
Well, let John pull it together.
Yeah, that's the point. Okay, another point here.
you, John.
I question about the adequacy of the library. And we're going to have two universities north of us, and one of those may bring in two other universities. Now, are you having an understanding that from the standpoint of the technical volumes that these schools will need, are they to be housed within the university, or are they housed within this library?
We haven't had any of those conversations yet with the university about what
We
is
need
their
that.
needs.
We're
We
talking
are
about-
anticipating doing that.
Well,
I
I
think
will
we
say,
have-
the one comment we did have that came early on, it hasn't been since verified, is that there was an indication that the majority of what these universities do is online-based or self-stored, I guess, for
I
lack
hear
of better
that, but
terms.
that isn't necessarily true.
That may not be, Mayor. I appreciate that. So the question is,
It is partially true.
we need to ask the question for sure again and verify it.
Well, but I think at the same time, Mayor, these guys have done a lot of libraries, and we have talked to them, but if we were to change the program substantially because of their requests, you know, as we all know, we're working on a very definitive budget, so that's, you know, we're not sure where that financially will get taken care of, and we aren't privy to where the universities might be in their fundraising or anything else. But, you know, we're glad to do it.
Glad to do what?
Talk to them, but if they start saying add 5,000 feet here, or 6,000, or 8,000, whatever it
Then you
is,
bring it to us.
fine.
It seems to me the last email I got from one of the universities was a statement that most of their students do online. There's very little storage.
That's right.
For them to walk across the street, no, they'd rather do it from their dorm or from wherever they are. And they're so much unlike all of us that were brought up in the area. You go to the library and you sit at the library.
And
so-
the staff is having conversations with the universities
Yeah.
all the time
Yeah.
about this very question.
I
Yeah.
remind people all the time that I'm the youngest one sitting here, and I'll do it again. I think I went into the library 3 times in my 4 years in the university. I mean, everything.
They don't even read the
That
newspapers.
was 13
and
years
they
ago.
read
I read the
online.
newspapers, but I don't think I stepped
Taking
foot in a
action
library.
to
And
that.
I agree with the mayor's point. Universities come back, say 8,000 feet, come back and talk to us. We got to have that discussion. I mean, we made a commitment at this table to partner with those universities, and if our library is inadequate for their research levels or of things of science nature and that sort of thing, that we make this a successful venture with them in terms of nursing schools, and I mean, that's what you're getting at, is those kind of opportunities.
Well, fine arts, too.
Fine arts. I mean, those kind of things that are going to require hard copy. We need to have that discussion. That said, driving to work last week, I think I heard a story on the radio about the book culture being gone in 20 years. And so if there's literature or studies that are coming to light in terms of what is happening, and Brenda's always made this point in terms of coexistence in a library with a variety of different items, I venture to guess my 3 or 4 or 5 times in the library during my 4 years in higher ed, my daughters will probably be nothing. when she gets to that environment.
That's how my teenagers are only
So-
online.
It's,
Rarely go to
I mean, I look anything up right now on the fly.
I have a daughter who's a writer who publishes.
Anyway,
She does nothing at a library. She does it all online.
Yeah. Well, most students go to the library to see
I
see
go
who else
tell-
is at the library, frankly.
Well, that's what, yeah, I mean, it's a
That's what we did here.
computers are. But even then, I mean, nobody can say that out loud.
But
unions are
to
becoming.
to what the mayor was talking about, we really did discuss it at one of our council meetings, and the universities, the couple that I talked to that day, we had a kind of an education day. They were talking about the accreditation requirements, and that the people that do the accreditation are still in the old school, and they want to see books in that library, or they will not give the universities the right to operate. And that was the really big thing that they were concerned about. And they said it didn't matter whether someone came in and studied those books or not. They needed to be there. So kind of to the mayor's point.
Just-
Now, that's
just
going to
so-
be changing, too.
just so
Well,
you know,
one day
we
it will be.
We are trying to schedule meetings with the universities next week when we're out here, so we've already got that process.
Yeah. And there's nothing wrong with them housing some of their own volumes, candidly, if it's strictly for their use. Engineering, fine arts, and nursing very well could be satisfied within their own
Probably
facilities.
wouldn't take much space at all, if any. So, space, all right.
When are we going to proceed to discuss the financing options here? We've preliminarily done that. Is there a time where we actually, at what point do we decide on our financing options?
Jim, could you answer that?
If we're going to be
I'm not
breaking
sure
ground in December, when are we going to decide how we're going to pay for all this in a final sense?
As far,
I thought that was already decided.
That's what I thought so, too.
Well, what was the answer then?
You know, Jim, why don't you review the financing schedule? I mean, we're going to be bonding and stuff like that.
right. The financing, for the most part, has been established in the development agreement with the team here. So as far as the specific methods, the bonding, et cetera, that's something that the finance department will be coordinating as we proceed along. But there really isn't a point in the process where we need to come back and go through any financial detail again, just because it has already been established in the development agreement that's already been approved by the council. I'm not sure if we're talking about the same financing.
What the mayor
We need to
wants
get
to
a
know is
copy
where
of
we're going to
that.
get the money.
Oh,
Where's the money coming from?
that's something we can certainly come back to
We're
you.
going to borrow it. I mean,
Yeah, I mean,
we're going to
No
sell
choice.
$67
Here,
million worth of
Larry's got some
Larry's-
input.
Yeah, I will, just, what we talked about when we entered into all of these agreements, that first.
Larry, could you please sit at the table?
Okay. The financing structure that we proposed as we put these agreements together and presented them before you looked at our capital improvement plan and the amount of money that we had available, and it contemplated, first of all, a review of assessed valuation that we actually have until September of this year. If our assessed valuation is at insufficient levels, we could actually slow down or stop this project at that point in time. It also contemplated a financing package where we would do interim financing for a period of approximately 2 years using a format, a lease purchase type format, until the general obligation bond financing was put in place. The total amount of money, I'm going on memory, but the total amount of financing that we had in place over the 5-year period of time in the capital improvement plan was about $67 million. That did include the capitalized interest and all costs related to it. I think further than that, I'd have to go look at my notes for more specifics, but that was the financing plan that we had in place at the time.
Thank you, Larry.
So, okay, then, is Langford writing the contracts with the builders? Is that how that works?
Well, we will. I mean, we essentially have pre-development agreements with them now, but as soon as we present the staff and the council have guaranteed max price contract to construct the library at City Hall. Assuming you guys approve it at that point, then we'll sign it.
And okay, that's, when do you expect that to happen?
October of this year?
That's when we make the go, no-go decision, whether or not we're moving forward with this based on our assessed
Or take the 3
valuation,
years.
based on the schedule that we were presented back
That's
3,
correct.
4 months ago, right?
That's right.
Okay, do we know anything about what the City Hall building is going to look like, the lobby, or is this too early?
Gordon. Break and.
Well, it is, we are working on the whole design of the City Hall at the moment, council chambers, lobby. At this point, we don't have any visuals, but in our next meeting, probably on the 11th, we plan to have some pretty good idea what that lobby is going to be looking like.
Okay, thank you.
But you still, I think some of our requests the last time was a lobby that we could use it for art exhibits, for social events, so that's still in the picture.
Yes, it is.
And in fact, that's one of the reasons it takes on the orientation it does, because it's, we talked about environment and the way things are set up. If you'll notice, it's sort of on the north side of the building, so it's protected from direct light, that sort of thing. And then the spill-out space to the park is able to be used inside and outside, so that's the intent.
Yeah, we have a city, one of our neighbors built a city hall, and their lobby, to me, is just too big. There's no intimacy whatsoever, and you could put a lot of things in there, but they haven't, and I'm not sure we would, so.
That's a good point. They can be too big.
Oh, it's like 40-foot vaulted ceilings. It's gargantuan.
Well, I think when you walk in, you see the stairway, you know, the first thing you want to do, walk in a city hall, you want to see a big set of stairs, and that's what you do. So they didn't really look at as a visual pleasantry for someone when walking the city hall. So it gives you more of that cement feel when you walk into it.
Well, I think, too, they wanted to use that as a conference center for people to display areas that were using the.
You're right, it's dual purpose, and we have been, right, Frank? We were at a meeting there
Yes,
recently
they
where
had
they
to-
set
they had to do
tables
that.
in that entryway, which really was a great use of space when you think about it. And I
But you
don't
have to-
remember how
you have
many
to
people
consider.
were there, but we were able to do that. So they were looking at it as a dual space.
Consider what you're going to use that space for. Is that
Yeah.
what you want as your display space, or are you going to move it out in possible indoor, outdoor, some of the things we were talking
Right,
about?
exactly, yeah.
You know, it goes along with all the other, the
And you also-
library and the
But-
Performing Arts Center and all that. That's all, they all have a function.
You
other
also
than
have to
just that.
consider that lobby space is very expensive space.
Yeah.
Yes, it is. That's right, it is expensive. That's why I say if you can combine it in some of these other things where you have it in the outdoor.
But also.
I'd like there to be some warmth when you walk
Yeah,
in this lobby.
is to fish back,
Yes.
the thing that, at least when we were going through this early stages is that the citizens wanted, you know, they wanted a museum, they wanted a performing, we want.
everything.
Well, so when we talked about the city center and we talked about the city hall, we were talking about a space that could be used for multi-things. So if the art council wants to have an art festival, you can hang some artwork in the entryway. That's basically that's why their need for a little bit larger entryway was for dual purposes, because realistically, we're not going to have the Performing Arts Building for a while, and we're not going to have a museum for a while, and so it's just the usage of space.
So harp could be in the corner.
Huh?
A harp could be in the
A harp could be in the corner, yes.
And you're going to play?
And you're going to
Oh,
play.
yes.
My last point, and then I'll ask
I know.
if the public has anything. You had 4 phases or 5.
5 phases.
Is the 67 million phase 1?
Yes.
Okay. Then,
Was that infrastructure? in
when
it?
do you
City
expect
Hall.
we move to 2, 3, and 4? Is there any timing on that whatsoever?
Well, Mayor, we've got
What are they paying?
it's market-based, but, you know, we do have some requirements in our ground lease with you that we need to exercise the options to lease on a certain schedule, but we've got time to kind of see where the market goes. So I hope we can be underway on the first one, 18 months, 24 months, I'm guessing at the market, but hopefully
first one meaning
City
phase
Hall
2.
comes first.
Phase 2, yes.
But they are building
Phase 1 of
City
the
Hall.
project.
They're building it, but we're paying for it.
Okay, any comments from the public? Any further comments from the council? Mr. Gelser?
Overall, I think the plan is pretty good. The library is, I'm underwhelmed with the library. I think you're shorting it. In phase 4 or phase 5, you have a multi-generation center. And in the library, you have no space for meeting rooms or anything else. And if you go to any of the libraries here in town, they are open basically from 9 to 9, Monday through Thursday. If you want your retail and you want your 24/7 environment of phase 2, I would strongly suggest that you have some type of meeting rooms that can be expanded into stacks or research areas or whatever in that library, even at the get-go, because the multi-gen center is 8 to 10 years out, and this enables you to have a place to bring people and also enables the city to utilize the space and get people into this area. And that's my only criticism.
Do we have space on the first section of the city hall for additional rooms, that could use, the citizens
We
could
have meeting
use?
rooms on the first floor, and then, of course, all conference rooms upstairs.
And enough space that we could allow other entities to come in and use it? Okay.
Right, like we do 117
Okay,
right now.
so we have allowed for that?
Yes.
Oh, my goodness, yes.
Okay, I think we've gone through this one long enough. Why don't we take a 5-minute break and let you file out of here in order without too much interference. So about 5 minutes, we'll start.
But you got the feel that.
Second item is an update on the status of Matrix. John Fishbach.
Mr. Mayor, members of the council, sorry. Okay,
I guess I can eat it.
I'll be online in a second. The purpose of tonight's meeting is to, no, this isn't it.
I want to go with that. We'll go.
Let's do this one.
There's it, okay. The purpose of tonight's presentation is to provide a one-year update. Last December, we promised that we'd be back, how we're doing. We also give you quarterly updates. We're going to look at the recommendations that are completed, those that are in progress, and those that are deferred or on hold. The brief history is summer of 07, Matrix Consulting completed their assessment of the organization and our operations. In December of 07, City Management provided a response to Matrix's report. In February of 08, departments began working on the Matrix recommendations, and at that time it was also agreed that the council would receive a high-level status of those recommendations quarterly. In March, June, and September of 08, you received the quarterly statuses from City Management. This is just a pie chart of the various recommendations and how the bulk of them are completed, the percentage that's deferred, those that are on hold, and those that are in progress. Of the 185 recommendations that we're tracking, 108 have been completed. So 58% of them have already been completed. 40 recommendations are in progress, or 22%. 33 recommendations are on hold, or 18%, and 4 recommendations have been deferred until fiscal year 09 and 10, and that's just 2%. There were also 12 recommendations that were disagreed with and are not being pursued, and we will discuss those major ones in a moment. The next few slides will discuss a sampling of the recommendations that have been completed. In the city clerk's office, this is a sampling of the 58% that have been completed. We've developed a records retention schedule. We finished that in April of '08. We've established a vote-by-mail program. That's going to occur this year for the first time. City Manager's Office, we established a Parks and Recreation Department. That new department has been separated from Public Works, and the new Parks Director started today. You met Mike Spitz a little while ago. And we've reduced the City Manager's span of control with the Directors of Human Resources and the City Clerk's Office reporting to the 2 Deputy City Managers. Under Community Development, we've published cycle times for building permits and planning permits, and we've split current and long-range planning into 2 separate entities. They're both reporting to Harvey. Community Services, we have a citywide web information that now provides greater information to the public about services provided, and we really have an award-winning web page right now, so it's really fantastic. And then the volunteer policies, we expanded them to include current job descriptions. Under engineering, we've consolidated the CIP staff into the CIP division, so we've taken the different project managers and moved them all over to and under Raul, and we've involved construction inspectors in design of the CIP projects. And finance, we've updated the cost allocation plan. The final report was received from MGT, and this report includes current cost drivers that are being used right now in determining the budget for next year. And fire, we've enhanced the analysis of a need for new fire stations with the Sonoran Valley Fire, the Public Safety Master Plan, and that was approved by the City Council on July 14th. And we've established a 90% travel time goal, which the Sonoran Valley Public Safety Master Plan established a desired time of 4 minutes and 59 seconds, and 90% of the time that we should meet that. And also 7 minutes and 59 seconds for battalion chiefs. And I'll address that in a moment as to how we're doing. Human Resources, we are tracking the time required to fill positions, and we've confirmed that we're meeting all of the performance targets that we've set. And we've developed a compensation study. The Waters Construction Consulting Group met with the City Council last April, and it was determined that the city policy would be to peg the salaries at 100% of market, and we're struggling to keep at that level. Information Technology Services, we're now using wireless technology for building inspections. That was implemented, and it's going well. I mean, development's so slow, it's easy. Establishing technology. Steering committee, we're now doing that, and we have the steering committee looking at different proposals for what needs the IT department has. Legal Services, conducting client satisfaction survey, and that is to be done in January of each year, and we're doing that right now. And developing standard agreement forms. Both legal and procurement have met with the directors, and these forms are being located on the intranet. Municipal court, add file storage. Well, here it is. I mean, we've done that in spades. Municipal court is very well taken care of right now. Conduct customer satisfaction surveys. A new report titled The Bench Press, highlighting the statistics and customer feedback, was started in November.
Do you get positive feedback from customers of the court?
We actually do, yes. Yeah. People really appreciate it, so that's good.
Yes, good.
In Parks and Recreation, they conduct park inspections. We have completed them, and this is something that we're doing monthly now. Continuation of the matrix recommendations that have been completed in the police department, developing performance measures. We have Operate CompStat now. We made a presentation to you, I think it was a couple weeks ago. I mean, that program is fantastic. It's really fantastic. And now using case management system to track investigations, and we're cross-checking caseloads and have begun to report monthly internally on all open cases as part of CompStat, and that works very well too. Public Works, we've reduced the city's fleet. We've created pools, reallocated underutilized individual vehicles, reassigned and auctioned off some vehicles. And now we're providing UPS uninterrupted power source to traffic signals at all critical intersections, and they have all each been converted to UPS.
John, what does UPS mean?
uninterrupted power source.
Thank you.
Water resources, we elevated priority of preventative maintenance work. It's now the second highest work priority after emergency repairs. And it's not an as time permits type of priority. And we now conduct preventative maintenance on water distribution and wastewater systems consistently, and we're doing that on a now reoccurring basis.
Don, could you explain UPS? I'm not sure I understand.
I
understand the terms. I don't know.
Well, for example, in City Hall, you have uninterrupted. If power goes out, you immediately
So it's
kick
a
in
battery,
a generator.
or
yes.
is it a solar power?
I think it's solar powered. I'm not sure, though.
Okay. So it's electrical with a solar backup?
Yeah.
On the light pole.
Yeah.
The light pole.
Yes.
An IT system is usually a battery backup.
Yes.
Chief?
Sean says
What?
battery.
Chief, can you explain that?
No, Sean said, battery?
Okay.
Sampling of matrix recommendations in progress. This is the 22% of the guidelines that are in progress right now. Updating the city's design guidelines in community development. We're scheduled for an update in 2010. Enhancing conflict of interest guidelines, primarily in economic development area. We did review for the council the ethics committee report on January 5th. We are going back to the ethics committee. We've sent the report to Tim Delaney, who started the whole process with us, to ask him to review it, and we'll be going back to the committee in the next month or so, and they will then meet with the city council members to discuss concerns and ideas that you had. Clarify CIP management responsibilities in developing project management manual. Roles and responsibilities have been defined and are being reviewed by the project managers in the newly created CIP division. Establishing central purchasing and updating purchasing policies. Although additional staff were recommended in the matrix report, we actually are going backwards now. We are actually freezing positions, but we have been able to implement all of these recommendations in the procurement area. Sampling of the matrix recommendations in progress continued. Reducing call-out time fire. The call-out time for fire has been reduced by 7.84%. So we've gone from 60.99% to 68.83%. So it's going in the right direction. We believe that additional training and paying attention to this can increase it further, and so we're still working on that. Establishing service level.
Don, could you give those percentages again on the fire?
It increased 7.84% from 60.99% of the time to 68.83% of the time.
And it's just turnout time. I mean, to me,
turnout time is how long it takes you to get into your turnout gear
Right.
and drive out of the station.
okay, so we're only talking fire and motor vehicle accident responses.
Basically, yes.
Generally speaking, where they have to have their protective gear on,
Yes.
not medical.
Yes.
Okay.
We'll see. Put CIP projects on the GIS in the city manager's office. We're doing that. Obtain automated traffic signal pager system. We have installed that so that whenever a traffic signal develops a problem, it automatically pages a technician. Matrix recommendations deferred until 09 and 10. Establishing a management intern program in the city manager's office. This is something that we're looking at as part of the budget for this next year. I don't think we'll be able to implement it given what you'll hear next, but we are taking a look at that. Zoning ordinance amendments in the community development area. Staff is preparing limited text amendments to the zoning ordinance that will provide better organization and clarification of the processes in that, and that will be easier to use by the citizens and the staff. The City Council decided in 2007 not to delegate decision authority to the Commission on all use permits. Establishing internal service fund for facilities management and equipment management. This is in the finance area. This recommendation called for implementing chargeback mechanisms so that we can create a system where there would be a fund created so that you don't have to each year struggle through the budget process. Right now, we need to do a financial analysis to determine what needs there are, and then have to be able to determine how to meet those needs. These are recommendations that are on hold due to lack of resources. Adding management assistants in major departments, we're actually going the other way. We just recently have redeployed Connie Stepanitz into the finance department from Jim Nichols. And then we've left that position vacant as part of our cost-saving measures. And Connie is now in charge of the customer service representatives. And so it's part of our redeployment effort. Elaine is going to be filling in for what Connie was doing for Jim because she's very involved in the City Center project. So we will be looking at that again as we go on in time, but right now is not the time. Develop automated work order system for water resources, park maintenance, and street maintenance. That's basically on hold due to funding establishing to proceed. And centrally controlled park irrigation systems. That will require about $500,000, so that's on hold also. Major recommendations on hold. Replacing the automated permit system. The current HTE system was examined, but this project was put on hold because of the cost involved both in human resources and financial. Establishing a proactive sidewalk repair program. This recommendation suggested a formal sidewalk inspection program and replacement program. However, it was not funded, and we can't afford it right at this time. Enhancing street sweeping service, that's basically the same thing. We average about 25 to 30 curb miles per driver per day, and we had wanted to add an additional street sweeper, but that didn't happen again because of financing. There were several recommendations that we disagreed with and therefore have not been implemented. Returning first submittals on planning cases if deemed deficient. We did not feel that this was the best use of our time. We believe that we work with the people when they come in at the counter and get better results rather than just rejecting the applications and sending them back out on the street. And so we try very hard to be customer-oriented, even with development pressures. And then merging aquatics and recreation into community services, we disagreed with that. As you know, we've just created the new Parks and Recreation Department and separated that from the Public Works Department.
All that would be under him.
Yes. Yes. The ballpark, aquatics, recreation, and parks. Additionally, merging Public Works and engineering, we disagreed with that. Public Works is basically an operations center, and as of today, I sent out, since you approved the merger of those two departments, the Water Resources and the Public Works, I sent out an announcement that Sean has been promoted permanently to that position. He was, as you will recall, the interim director of Public Works and Water Resources. And so we did not feel that that should be combined, because engineering is taking a proactive look out to the future and designing projects rather than just maintaining them. So there is a separation there. And the redeployment of patrol officers from nighttime shifts to daytime shifts. What we're doing instead is an annual review. What we were concerned about is that we would end up with some shifts without adequate police protection. And so we have constant review over what the manpower level is, and the new streets crime unit that we've added is helping a lot in that particular area. In conclusion, what we're doing more with less. We have staffing. We've frozen 22 positions right now, and we have significant problems right now, which we'll address in a few minutes. So although the recommendations were to add 33 people in Matrix report, we have actually frozen 22 people. So that's roughly a shift of 55 people. But we're still doing most of the work. So the staff, I think, is lean and mean, and we're getting an awful lot of work done. And that's a credit to the staff members that are doing that, and so my hat's off to all of them. As we enter this next budget season, the constraints are obviously going to continue, and they're significant, as we'll hear in a moment. And where possible, we will use alternative resources, such as volunteers, which are a tremendous asset to the city, and both for personnel and then grant funding also. Matt Hansen's becoming more and more important. So that's what we're doing with Matrix. and I'd be happy to answer any questions that you might have.
Okay, thank you. Any questions or comments from the public? Any questions or comments, staff, council?
No, just
Okay, move on.
congratulations to staff and thank them for their sacrifices. But everybody's still got a job, so I guess that's
So far.
working smarter.
Yeah.
Now, I have one question, if I may. On the PAD process and the use permits process, that's still taking 6 to 8 months.
No.
So, we're way behind on some of these. There's one organization.
I'll have to get back to you on that. No, I
Okay,
don't
because
think
we got
so.
one organization that's been told it'll be six months before they can get their use permit.
Well, use permit takes a lot longer. I'll get that information to you,
Okay.
but we are not behind on any of
Okay,
those.
I need to talk to you about that use permit
Okay.
thing, because I've had some discussions with an individual from a church that is concerned about,
If it's the same, okay.
well, you know,
we'll
we'll talk about it. Okay.
If it's the same church, I know that that permit's been sitting for them to pick up.
I don't know if it is. We'll talk about it.
So, okay.
Okay, we'll move to the next subject, that's the budget, and Mr. Fischbach.
Okay, the agenda tonight is to talk about the fiscal year 9 budget, the update on the revenues and expenditures. Talk to you about our budget contingency plan that we're working on. Talk about the fiscal year 10 budget that we're working on, and answer any questions that you might have. This is the total sales tax that the city's received. We had a 6-year month total in 2008 of $19.7 million actually collected. We have a 6-month total in 2009 of $18.8 million actually collected. We are down about $900,000 totally, and the overall city budget is $18.8 million actual and $18.3 million budgeted. So we're $500,000 ahead of budget.
Say that again.
Amazing.
We're 18.8 actually collected,
Right.
and our budget is 18.3. So we are 500,000 ahead. So this figure is just the actuals last year compared to the actual this year, not budget. So budget, we're still ahead because of construction. Construction sales tax has been going relatively well up to this point. We're about $1 million over budget for the first 6 months. And this is the actuals. So we're actually 500,000 less in the actual collected from fiscal year 08 to fiscal year 09. But we're still holding on because of the good collections we had prior to this. We are obviously projected to decrease, continue to decrease, but we project that we will meet the budget by the end of the year for the sales taxes. Total sales taxes and non-construction. Non-construction sales taxes are down about $600,000 for the year right now. And so these are all of the sales taxes other than construction. We're under budget by about $1 million for non-construction sales taxes.
That's good.
The good news in this whole thing is the retail sales taxes. We're up $100,000. Not many places can say that. But we are up $100,000 over last year. We are awaiting our figures from this holiday season. They will be in this month, and I'm anxious to see those. I don't know how they will turn out. Nationally, they were down 10%. I mean, so far we've...
December's up there, though.
Yeah, but that's for October's collections, November's collections.
Okay.
So we're always at 2 months behind.
All right.
2 months arrears.
John, what do you
we get
attribute
December's
that to?
this month.
What do you attribute that to?
Well, the new stores that we're opening. I mean, so, and we don't have a lot of car dealers in town. Avondale is really hurting badly.
Well, I'm telling you, Olive Garden is going crazy. They opened for lunch today and was packed.
Good,
Packed.
good.
Lose one, gain another, so.
Hey, listen, at least we're something.
What was our budget amount on retail sales tax? Did you say that? Sorry.
Yes, it was. I'm sorry.
It's okay. Come back to it later.
Sales.
No.
I'll get it from you.
Restaurant and bar sales taxes were down about $200,000 for restaurants and bars.
Wait a minute, what was that one?
Nobody's drinking.
They're all having the breadsticks at Olive Garden.
Well, I think yesterday they were all at the Super Bowl parties. But
Oh, and that's
here's the
other-
really bad news now.
Oh, great, thanks.
Our building permits, plan review permits are down $5.5 million
Wow.
from last year. We're under budget right now, $2.2 million. So, we had conservatively estimated, and even that conservative estimate is down $2.2 million.
budgeted 4.4.
Yes.
Wow.
So we're down 2.2. Now, we're watching Westcor, and I noticed Macy's today, their huge announcement about 7,000 additional layoffs. But we're watching Westcor project. They are still online, they say. They are still online with both Macy's, Dillard's, and Harkins.
Just editorial note, none of them affected their current operations in our city. There was no mention of Arizona layoffs in
No, there
in the
weren't.
money news today.
$1.3 million is projected to be paid in building plan review fees, fire plan review fees, and permit fees when Westcor comes in. So that will give a big shot in the arm. We will receive over $10.3 million in construction sales tax from the project. So it's going to be a significant shot in the arm. That's all one-time money, though, so next year we can't repeat that.
And not on a credit card.
Not on a
Yeah, I
credit
saw
card.
the sign.
We have implemented that new policy, yes. Westcor has submitted plans for the city review. We've responded for the first time of the review, and so now they have to come back to us with amendments to that review. Harkins has already been through the review, so Harkins is about ready to be permitted. They plan to start work on the infrastructure March 1st of '09, so that's what we're working towards. What we have been doing because of this, trying to manage through this, is we've reduced development expenditures by $1.3 million in community development, engineering services, fire building services in fiscal year '09. We've frozen positions. We've frozen a permit tech 1. We've converted a permit tech 1 to a part-time position. We have gone to all in-house reviews. As you know, Brown was doing a lot of the reviews previously. Almost $1 million last year, as a matter of fact. So we are now doing all reviews in-house. Planning and Zoning Commission discontinued dinners. We don't have food here tonight.
Oh.
No, we're starving.
And we've discontinued acceptance of credit cards, which was important. And seminars and conferences are restricted to inside the Phoenix area. Engineering services, we've cut, that resulted in $535,000 in savings. In engineering services, we've cut $558,019. A plans examiner supervisor position is frozen. A GIS analyst is frozen. Savings from vacant civil engineering and reclassification to project managers, and reducing consultant fees. Reducing engineering services and reducing on-site inspections, off-site inspections. In the fire and building services, we've been able to reduce $244,000 so far. Part-time fire inspectors' hours were reduced by 10%, and building inspection supervisor was frozen, and a building inspector 2 was frozen, and a plans examiner was frozen. We've also redeployed several positions. We redeployed a permit technician in community development to the courts, and we've redeployed a building inspector in fire to code enforcement. So we're trying to redeploy people to where they're most needed, and if they aren't needed, then we're able to not backfill their vacancy that they've created. Our turnover right now is going down very low. As one would expect, people aren't moving, and so we don't have a whole lot of new positions coming up for freezing possibilities. What we have here is expenditures are down about 6.6%, and that's primarily due to savings in contractual services. The year-end variance for expenditures will likely be greater than 6.6% because this does not take into account the annualized savings of the $5.6 million in savings that we have cut from the budget right now. So that will be kicking in the second half of the year, so we will presumably be much less than 6.6%. Revenues are down 10.3%, or $31.3 million, as compared to $34,856,000 in the budget. What we've done with the fiscal year 09 budget so far, the environmental impact study, we've been able to, you just approved that a couple of weeks ago. That was estimated previously at $500,000. We were very pleased to be able to get the contract for $360,000, a not-to-exceed contract, so that saved us $140,000 on the road to Montage. Stadium liner is still the $1.2 million. Local government investment pool is $350,000, but we aren't losing all of that. We still are waiting to see what we will get back from the state, but that was when the Lehman Brothers went bankrupt. The HERF allocation reduction is a state reduction that is occurring, so that's $198,000 less that we will be receiving. And the Sonoran Valley operations, we've gotten that down from $2.5 million to $1.7 million right now. And we've done that by negotiating a new contract for the sheriffs, and we're negotiating a new contract with Maricopa. We don't have one to present to you yet, but we have moved, as of January 1st, 2 firefighters back up here. So there's only 2 firefighters down in the Montage Fire Station, so they can deal with emergency medical calls, but they can't fight a structural fire. So we are dependent, if there is a structural fire, we are dependent upon Maricopa coming to help us. What we're trying to, I'm sorry?
They can't fight
They can't go in and.
They can't fight interior. They can fight exterior. If
Sure.
there's an exterior fire, they
Absolutely.
can fight that with too.
Yes. And so, but we're still negotiating with Maricopa. We hope to have a contract before the City Council within the month. Budget reductions that we've implemented, we have implemented, as I mentioned, $5.6 million worth of savings.
I'm sorry, excuse me, John, we got stuck with the crime lab bill?
No.
I guess I didn't hear you.
You said you had the crime lab one.
Oh, I'm sorry.
I interrupted.
It says crime
Oh,
lab.
I'm sorry. The crime lab, yes, we still have the bill. We have still not paid it.
Oh, okay.
And we're still awaiting, none of the league cities have paid it.
Okay.
And so we're still waiting to get that resolved with the state.
Okay.
And then the $350,000, the state payback, the shared revenues, the $29 million, we've sued, we've made the oral arguments, the League of Cities have
Right.
made the oral arguments before the Supreme Court. So that decision will probably be coming down in a few weeks. I'm sorry, I skipped those. And then the fiscal year 9 budget reductions, as I mentioned, the $5.6 million in savings that we've already implemented, and this is without layoffs. I mean, so we have yet to lay off an employee. And since we are halfway through the fiscal year, we're only probably realizing about half of these savings for this year. Next year, we'll realize all of the savings in 1 year. Sonoran Valley savings include the reducing the sheriff's contract by $440,000. We really appreciate Sheriff Joe Arpaio working with us in implementing that change, and that is now implemented. So as of February 1st, we are down to 5 days a week, 8-hour shifts, rather than 24/7. And those 8 hours are varied. They aren't all 8 to 5 or something, so that they don't know when their coverage is going to be. And then we've reduced the fire department overtime by $363,000 so far by moving the men and women up here. And the way that is helping out is that instead of paying overtime for backfilling vacancies up here for sick leave and vacation, we're using the extra people to backfill. And we're monitoring the overtime on basically a weekly basis. The fiscal year 09 budget contingency planning, we're anticipating no growth. In fact, we're having further decreases. We're anticipating additional fiscal impacts from the state. The state has taken $12,536. No big deal, but it's LTAF funds, Local Transportation Assistance Fund. They've swept those. And then we're trying to examine the governor's, or the bill that she signed for the budget, and trying to see if there's other implications for cities in there.
John, the LTAF, is that like Dial a Ride or those kind of programs? I don't understand what the Local Transportation Assistance Fund.
I
Can you
think
just-
that is.
Is that the Dial a
I
Ride
think
and
so,
all those
yes.
that?
But I will have to let you know.
No, it's the
Just
Dial.
Dial a
It's
Ride, not
the,
Park and
it's for people who need assistance. Is that what we're saying?
Yes.
That is-
And then we've implemented the fiscal year '09 budget reductions in programs and services that have been submitted by all departments. And we are really involved. I mean, the staff, I think, is doing a fantastic job. Terry Canada, our budget manager, is just, today we reviewed a book about that thick of, that we're going to be reviewing with the executive staff tomorrow, with budget prioritizations, which I'm excited to bring to you in the near future, because this is a fantastic piece of work that's in progress. But we put together a staff team that has gone through every priority project using our core values and assessing what priority it is. So we have a chart now that we can look at and determine, without political input or reality, but it at least is a place to begin looking. And so we're looking at that and balancing the budget against that. The departments tomorrow are going to be asked, I hope that they don't hear this.
They're all sitting right there.
They're right there.
They're going to be asked to do 15, 20, and 25% cuts in addition to what they've done already. We have cut, and now it's not all flat figures. I mean, we have cut 10% right now. Somebody may have cut 11, somebody may have cut 6, but we have cut 10% already. And this 15, 20, and 25% is on top of that 10%. And the reason we're going 15, 20, and 25 is that, it's like the city of Phoenix. We may end up having to go deeper in some areas than, say, in police and fire. And so it may be, police and fire might be X%, and we'll have to be 22.7% like the city of Phoenix. Joanne?
Now, you're not speaking of before June 30th. You're speaking for the next year?
Yes.
For '09?
For next year, yes. Right now, we are on track to finish this year, as I've told you before, that we will probably dip into our reserves by the $3.5 million in that range, but not more than that. So we aren't dipping into the $20 million reserve that you have established.
Right.
And we are on track to do that right now.
Because we have 23.
Oh, it's
have
the
tw-
additional
so
we
we're-
have.
We're hitting it,
Okay.
but we're not touching the 20.
We
per
aren't
se.
touching
We're
the
still
20.
just hitting the 23.
Right.
Yeah, I
Okay.
understand.
The Maricopa County's sheriff, I've already talked to you about. The fire EMS, I've talked to you about. And reallocating the fire EMS. And last year, I point out that Maricopa, of the 60 calls, this was 18-month period, only 48% of them were in the city of Maricopa. So our people down in Montage did not have that much to do. Fiscal year '09 budget contingency planning. Let me review quickly for you some of the redeployments and staffing changes that we have been doing over the past few weeks. Redeployments during January and February, the following moves are taking place. Permit technician in community development has been moved to the court clerk's position that was vacant, and then we are not backfilling the community development's position. Building inspector in the fire department is assisting community services with code enforcement activities. The executive management assistant to Jim Nichols, the deputy city manager in my office, has been moved to the finance department to fill in the customer services representative, and that is not being refilled. Elaine will be filling some of those responsibilities. Strategic planning coordinator, she'll be the executive assistant to Jim Nichols from now on. Utility technician 2 is becoming a senior utility technician in wastewater, and then we take a 1 and put him up to 2, and then we vacate that position and are leaving that vacant. Mailroom clerk in finance has been moved over to a utility technician 1 and that position is not being backfilled. And the administrative assistant in economic development, will assist the Public Works Department on a part-time basis with the emissions footprint data compilation project that we're involved in right now with ICLEI. And then the project specialist in economic development has been redeployed to the stadium project to assist with special projects. And the administrative assistant in Public Works Water Resources has been reassigned to the Parks and Recreation Department, the new department, for their administrative support. By implementing these various changes, it hasn't resulted in that significant of savings, but we've been able to save an additional $126,000 from these efforts. And then, as you know, we implemented the part-time job sharing program. We only had one person take it, but even that helps us a bit. So, we've had an employee cost-saving team that we put together, and they have done an incredible job. They've submitted 72 cost-saving measures. They've submitted 3 cost-saving measures for the future. They've submitted 24 revenue enhancements that we're taking a look at, and 38 task force ideas that are already in progress or being done. We're analyzing each one of these. The committee has met 3 times so far. They will be meeting again. And this is asking the employees who are actually doing all the work to come up with the ideas, how can we save money? And the ideas are ranging from a savings of $1.6 million down to $12,000. I mean, so it's really fantastic, the effort that the employees are putting into this. And the finance department is evaluating potential new revenue sources, and the program evaluation team I referred to under Terry Canada is looking at core services and discretionary services, trying to get a handle on what do we have to do by law or by expectations or whatever, and what is a discretionary service. And that will be used as part of the fiscal year 2010 budget process. Budget measures that we're looking at right now for the fiscal year 2010 budget, we're obviously monitoring revenues as closely as we can. We're anxiously awaiting the sales tax receipts for the Christmas season. GO bond restructuring, we are preparing a proposal to bring to you. We've mentioned it to you once before that we'll refinance our bonds from 15 years to 30 years. Yes, it'll cost more over the life of the bonds, but it will save us $2 million a year from the general fund on the bonds. And so that will be a significant savings to us for the fiscal year 2010 budget.
John, what's the time frame on that, on the rollover?
On the refinancing
Yeah,
of the bond?
on the refinancing. What's the time frame on that?
It starts in 2009, right now this year, and goes through 2037.
Well, how's the bond market right now?
Oh, the bond market, I mean, we can refinance. Larry, do you know the percentage?
We've assumed 5.5%.
Okay, which is high. So it'll be something less than 5.5. I think it'll be something less than 5. But and then I mentioned to you that we're doing further budget contingency reduction planning of 15, 20, and 25%. And as I mentioned, we do anticipate the use of some of our reserves, but not going into the $20 million this year. We will have to come up with somehow balancing what we expect to do next year and what we expect to finance from our reserves, but we still haven't gotten to that point. This is representative of how difficult this budget is right now in this metropolitan area. There's almost 2,000 positions up here that have been lost. Fortunately, none of them have been from us yet, but City of Phoenix, is actually 1,300 positions from the general fund. Well, no, I guess it is 1,070 from the general fund, and then 300 and some from the other funds. 32 positions in Surprise, they just announced that they've laid off. 340 positions in Mesa, 50 positions in Chandler, 39 positions in Buckeye, plus the 26 positions that were frozen. Tempe is reducing their workforce by 75 by 2010. Avondale has already eliminated, it's actually more than 20 positions, I think it was 37. Bullhead City has eliminated 20 positions. And, you know, these aren't big places.
20's a lot for them.
Cave Creek, 7 positions. Gilbert, 10 positions. And Tolleson, 9 positions are frozen.
You use the word positions and you use the word layoffs. Can I assume that 20 positions may be a vacant?
Yes. In Phoenix's case, for example.
In Avondale?
Avondale, I think Avondale's 20 positions are 20 layoffs, because they also froze 20-some positions. So I think it was 40-some positions total.
And how many have we frozen?
I'm
How
sorry.
many have we
22 so far.
frozen?
But that represented almost 2,000 people just from that little thing.
John, you talked about going to the directors just a while ago, about saving something, 25%, was that the figure?
15, 20, and 25.
15 to 25%. How is that move going to affect the workforce?
Obviously, if we had to implement 25%, it would affect the workforce significantly. We don't anticipate that we'll have to go to 25%, but we're trying to plan ahead as to how far will this go. We haven't seen a bottom yet. We don't know where the bottom is going to be. So we're trying to stay ahead of it and proactively manage the city so that we do not get into financial trouble. And by doing that, I think that we're very well served right now. But if we had to go to 25%, Dick, it would be significant.
Yes, it would. Thank you.
National indicators, fiscal year 10 is turning out to be very challenging right now. And I won't tell you in this type of meeting where we're at yet because it's way too preliminary. But the retail sales are down, as you know, 10% or more. Credit and housing still is a major problem, not just in Goodyear, but around the country. Oversupply of housing stock from 1999 to 2007, housing stock was way greater than we placed. So there is a huge backlog of housing sitting out there waiting to be absorbed. So we will not come out of this quickly. We will come out of it slowly. National employment is down. I mean, I was talking to a friend today in Oregon. Oregon is now in double digits. I mean, that is horrible for 10+% unemployment. Arizona has gone from number 2 in job growth in 2006 to 22 in 2008 to 48th in 2009. And that's because of the housing being such a growth industry in this state. The only sector to grow in Phoenix Mesa area was December 07 to 08 was health services. That is the only sector that's growing.
Couldn't you, and then that job growth, couldn't you look at that in another vein, that maybe Arizona hasn't come up with a strategic plan on how to get these companies that we've continually lost to Oregon, New Mexico? I mean, we lost significant amount this year, at least 5 that I know of. So is that in that figure?
Yes. In the solar industry, for example, we have gone after, the state has gone after 12 companies in the past year, 2 years. And we have failed 12 times to attract them. And many of those have gone to Oregon.
In New Mexico.
And New Mexico. But this state needs, and they are considering a bill this year again for a solar renewal, I forget the name of it, but we are actively lobbying that effort because that is what the state needs in order for Goodyear to attract some industry.
I guess tendency people want to just crawl into a shell during this economic downturn, but really we have to be really proactive in reaping new businesses.
That's right.
New industries.
You know, and I thought what was significant when we heard Elliot Pollock talk also was the fact that he said we need to replace what was our number one
tourism and housing.
Housing, and we need to replace it with something, and what we replace it with is going to be very, very important to us in our future. And of course, one of the things he did mention was the solar, but he had some other things that he was talking about too. And
that's right.
And we're not there yet. We're not doing that strategic thinking.
Fiscal year 10 Goodyear budget impacts. We have all kinds of budget sweeps that we're still trying to analyze through the state's budget. different funds that we can apply for grants from and everything. Military Installation Fund was swept $1.7 million. DUI Abatement Fund was swept $774,000. Recycling Fund was swept $390,000. Housing Trust Fund was $17.5 million. The city would not apply, but would have indirect impact because it's mortgage assistance, renter assistance type programs. And then the State Parks Enhancement Fund was swept, and that's $4 million. And the Economic Strength Projects was swept to the tune of $1.2 million. So everything that the governor could get, or the government could get their hands on has disappeared.
I have a question. So if we're subject to get some of this stimulus money, is the state going to take that too as soon as it comes in, or do we are going to be able to take dibs on it?
That's the next item on here.
Okay, just curious.
Potentially redirecting federal stimulus funds to the state transportation projects, because the funds were swept of the STAN funds, the statewide transportation acceleration needs, which pays for I-10 and pays for 303. All of those were swept. So now the stimulus money that the state is anticipating to get will go to pay for those. So our projects, which are the Park and Ride, and I forget what else, but those we probably won't get now because the state's going to be using those funds to pay for the I-10 and the 303 project. So yes.
You can't win, can you?
No, we can't. State budget crisis could impact state shared revenues. It hasn't to this point, but now I think they have to settle on a $2.9 billion deficit for next year is what they're working towards. And then the $29 million state contribution that we talked about a moment ago that has been argued before the Supreme Court. The DPS crime lab fees, aren't resolved yet, and the fund sweeps that the legislature is going to do. Good fiscal year 10 budget. We're facing a very difficult budget. We're anticipating no growth, and we're actually anticipating decreases in many of our revenue sources. State impacts are still unknown, both from this year and next year. It's going to be significant next year. I don't know how the state will actually do it. Preparing financial and revenue forecasts, which are very difficult, and it's difficult partly because, we're guessing, because we haven't seen a bottom yet, and we don't know where that bottom will be. And the staff is conducting an evaluation of programs and services for fiscal year 10, and so that will form a great part of our estimates for you in the budget proposals. We'll be presenting the 2010 revenue estimates to you next month, and we'll be presenting the 2010 expenditures in April. We will have public workshops during the month of April. Last year we did not have any. We didn't feel the need for them when the budget was being prepared because there wasn't all that exciting. This year, unfortunately, there probably will be some significant cuts that the community is going to have to address and face. And then council workshops will be in May, and the council adoption would be scheduled for June prior to going on summer break. And we are also planning a council advance sometime in the March-April timeframe, which will probably be devoted to budget and city center. Those two things are probably the two highest priorities that are facing us right now.
What's the cost of doing it?
The advance?
Yeah.
We are going to be doing everything with very little
We'll
cost.
bring our own lunches,
Yeah.
okay? Everybody
Brown
pack a
bag,
lunch
they
for the
have
day.
to, yeah.
I mean, for example, I did an analysis of a trip that I had coming up to Washington, D.C. It was a minimum $1,966 without food. I canceled it today. I canceled ACMA, which is the Arizona City Management Association in Sedona this week. I'm supposed to be up there the rest of this week. I canceled that. I mean, we are literally canceling everything that is significant to the city.
I was surprised when I saw the cost of a council retreat. It's amazing.
They can be, yeah.
Yeah, we don't need.
Well, part of that was, our facilitator.
I know.
I think was close to $3,000 or something. So, other questions? Pardon me?
You finished?
Yes.
Any comments from the public? Comments from the public? Comments, questions from council?
No, it was good briefing. I'd like a copy of it.
Stated it
Yeah.
moving along.
I have one suggestion. I, about 2 weeks ago, sat with a variety of private sector folks, public sector folks, at the invitation of the two commerce chairs, both Senator Barbara Leff and Representative Michelle Reagan. Did I say that right? She's representative, right?
I don't know.
Anyhow, there was a good mixed variety of folks discussing commerce and economic development stuff within the state, and a lot of enlightenment between the two or three or four different types of individuals that were in there. So the lesson learned for me coming out of that is taking presentations like this, and if our representative and senator will hear it, yourself and Romina and perhaps the mayor, briefing them on this makes it real. I mean, if you're dealing with budget cuts at the state that affect us, the trickle down stuff in terms of some of the shared revenues and police and fire and some other things that we're talking about, the real cuts to their neighborhoods, it makes it real for a lot of them. Mr. Nelson's got a great appreciation for that because he was on Phoenix City Council for 16 years, but others down there may or may not have that appreciation.
You don't.
And I apologize, is it Representative or Senator Barbara Luff?
Senator Leff.
Okay, she is the...
she's the commerce
She
chair.
is the sponsor of the solar bill for
Yeah,
us.
she's
Right.
taking
No,
the lead
she's-
from, she's taking the lead from
she's very
GPAC.
well
And I think the mayor, aren't you part of that now?
Not with Barbara Leff?
Well, she's actually, that's who's taking it on, but GPAC is behind that, supporting it.
We've got a freshman representative in the House representing our district, and we've got a somewhat seasoned representative, Mr. Wires. So briefing both of them as well as Senator Nelson, if they'll give you the time of day on this kind of thing to show what's happening at the local level.
Well, and quite frankly...
maybe it's pouring salt in the wound, I don't know. But,
Well, that's one of the reasons so that the legislators did this budget fix without getting at the cities.
Right.
Romina has worked very hard with Bob Burns, who is
Successfully, too.
very successfully. And they are all very respectful of what the cities, I mean, from Phoenix on down, what the cities have done, because none of the cities can deficit finance. And so we are all actively trying to manage our way through this.
You don't hear
difficult
us going to
time.
the state and asking to borrow.
Well, we don't go to the federal government. Well, we do ask for some stimulus monies,
Well, that's different, that's ours.
but the state gets them. So.
Let me ask two quickies. With the drawdown in fire resources at Sonoran Valley, I know the tires are not our responsibility, but is there concern about those tires catching fire again?
Absolutely.
Okay, but that being the answer, what are we going to do about it? Or who's going to do something about it, and what is it?
They have two state firefighters down there watching it. We were the ones that actually noticed the fire last time. And then they brought in the state crews. I mean, so basically we can't do much to fight that fire. All we can do is be on the alert and notice it if it is
here he
starting.
comes.
So
Mr. Fire heard.
So the state fully accepts their responsibility
yes, they
in this
do so
regard.
far.
Yes, sir.
Okay, and then you worried me, Larry, when you assessment. I mean, your point was very valid. Assessed values are going to decline dramatically. Is that in 2010 or is that 2011? And if so, how does that affect our?
10.
29.
29.
How about our city center?
The next estimate that we should get this month, which will be for 2010, from information we received from the county last fall and their preliminary estimates, we are expecting the secondary assessed valuation to drop by about 10%. That is better than what we had previously projected in all of our planning. We had assumed about a 15% drop. We had assumed, so that'll bring it to 900 million instead of 850 that we had assumed.
And that's for 9, not 10.
The year that starts July 1st, is
Oh,
really
10,
2010.
okay. 2010, yeah.
So we're,
Okay.
yeah, all of us are
Okay.
the same.
Right.
So it's that next year, that is the 25% drop in residential that all of us saw throughout the community. That is already factored in that number. It's the 2011 number that we'll be working closely with the county to see what they look at preliminarily, to see where that is. We're projecting that to be at about 900 million, but I don't know that it's that educated.
And we can still bond the city center at that?
We can bond
Nine.
it at 850.
Okay.
And that's what we're assuming that we will be doing.
So even if it did drop 15% rather than 10, we're prepared.
He's already
Yeah,
put
I
that
see
in.
that.
We were conservative in our estimate.
Okay, if we're good to go, we'll go to the last item. And I think, oh, here she comes. Patty.
Should be a shortie.
Provide feedback on a one-time use of the Goodyear Ballpark Suites by local nonprofits.
Good evening, Mr. Mayor.
Hey, Patty.
Rest of council, good luck. This is a tough act to follow, John.
You got better news than I do.
I know.
Yeah, a lot better.
Okay. Jeff wanted to make sure that I'd spoken to the mic. Was able to send you all some handouts ahead of time, and these are, it's a pleasure to bring these kinds of projects to you all for discussion this evening. First, let me just give you a little bit of background. In November, we notified as many of the nonprofits as we've worked with before and some others that serve the city of Goodyear. And we also put out some press releases, public service announcements, regarding our new program, which is the sponsorship by the ballpark of 10 Goodyear Ballpark Suites to nonprofits for the 2009 Cactus League spring schedule. Now, what we're doing is we sent out that letter and we invited folks to give us some information back. We use the same process as we use for the community funding program. And that process is that we make these announcements and the project applications come back in and then they're reviewed by a committee. There's 3 council members on that committee as well as 3 staff persons. Now, what I'd like to do is to also let you know that they had to be an Arizona nonprofit organization in good standing. They had to have a status of a nonprofit organization, and they had to maintain that status, excuse me. And they also had to provide us with a responsible party to answer questions when things came up during this process. And what we did was we asked for basically a one-page outline. Nathan Torres put this together from the ballpark for us. And they had to tell us a little bit about themselves. It was really an easy application. They had to tell us a little bit about themselves to give us an idea of what kind of project they would like to conduct if they had access to a ballpark suite. Real simple. Gave us a little bit of demographics and that sort of thing as well. So with that, we then brought these applications in. And let me get over here to my COAC so that I can just go briefly through there. We did receive 17 applications. One was pulled by the applicant, and that was because they were actually an Anthem application, but they wanted to get something into us, so the first go-round. 2 did not qualify for consideration because they were late. And as I mentioned before, council members Cavalier, Holland, and Mr. Souza helped us, and the team staff was Linda Dillard, Matt Hansen, and myself. So far, we okay? Mm-hmm. Okay. On your handout, I gave you a 2-page handout, and if we could just refer to that. I did not put this on the overhead, but it just goes to show you here that these were the applications that we received. There were 17, and I'll briefly go through them. The Alzheimer's Association, Assistance in Healthcare Incorporated, Boys and Girls Club of Metropolitan Phoenix, Canyon Springs Elementary School, Carpenter House, and so on. The middle of that document shows you what their application told us about themselves and how they would like to use the funds. As a team, we, if you could, we ranked the applications, and we came up with the top 10. There was a tie, so to speak, in the process, and it kind of forced staff to become involved and be involved in that selection process. The recommendations that we have for you at this time are the items marked with a yes. The two applicants who are late are marked with received late, and the other applicant who pulled is item number 4, and it's just marked as blank at this time. And I would entertain any questions that you might have or any concerns or issues that you would like to speak to.
What happened to Southwest Lending Closet?
It was one of the ones that was tied. It did not come up. I can actually give you the ranking if you'd like. What we had was after the 3 votes of the council members, we had a 4-way tie. Then what we did was we went back and I asked, I had voted silently to myself long before when the council members did. We went back and asked the other 2 staff persons to vote, and then we ended up with a 2-way tie. And so that's when I pulled my vote out, and then my vote was one that actually separated the applicants at that point. I could show you those exact numbers if you want to see those, how those rankings went. But that's what happened there. We had a clear choice of items 1, 3, 4, 7, 9, 10, 11, and 13. And then we had a staff vote, which determined items 6 and 8. So that'll give you an idea of that. 1, 3, 4, 7, 9, 10, 11, 13, and then 6 and 8 were added to that list. Any other questions, Mr. Mayor?
No. Any questions or comments? Opinions?
I have a question. In the future, the community funding that we donate, I'm assuming that's going to be less. Do we know that?
We don't know that, but I'm assuming that it will be, yes.
So this really is a creative way of using something that we have, because we're foreseeing that we may not have the funds. Right, we're replacing it. So I give credit to you guys for thinking of that. Because others will think, well, that was a funding source. But at the same time, you're right, I think we're going to be cutting, and so I appreciate that.
And what we're finding out right now is, without mentioning any names, not-for-profits are contacting us and asking us to increase the amount that we're giving because other people are cutting the amount they're giving.
Oh, I'm sure.
And we, of course, are not in a position to do that.
We can't do that.
Well, I guess I can speak to the nonprofits then. We expect it. We know it's coming. We know it's going to be cut. We are becoming more creative in seeking our grants, not just from the city, but from the state. And also trying to do those fundraisers, and that's why the ballpark was a big issue there, because just because it's a $750 suite, you could put it on an auction, you could make your tickets offered. I mean, there are very creative ways that you could bring more money in than just the face value of the worth of the suite. So I think most of us in the nonprofit world, we know this, we're getting prepared, we're working hard, we're trying to get as much as we can now because we know it's coming.
Okay, any comments from the public? I got one. I'll get to you. Any comments from the public, questions? Okay, Mr. Souza, then we'll go to the Vice Mayor.
Thank you, sir. Regarding Southwest Lending Closet, it was a tough decision on the 3 of us not to include there and not to include that organization in the funding. They do so much for the citizens of this community in lending medical supplies to anybody that needs them. So it was a tough decision, and I'm sorry that we didn't come through for it. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Well, you did on the community funding,
Yeah, they got
but just on the
community
ballpark, we lost as being part of that tie that you're talking about. And it's okay, we understand that. The community funding still came through for us. Thank you so much, I appreciate that.
Vice Mayor Antoniak?
Just
One observation, I know, because we're getting off, this is our first year doing it, but hopefully next year we'll get a little farther out in advance and assign these months and months in advance.
Not a problem. What we found out about this program after we had already advertised community funding. So what we did was that we felt the most effective way to get this program off the ground was to integrate it into the community funding. That's the reason that you're seeing this tonight ahead of time, because the ballparks these nonprofits need to know they've got this opportunity so they can plan to make the best of it. So probably, I'm going to speculate, but next year I would assume that we're going to come to you quite a bit earlier with this particular request so that they have plenty of time to make that fundraising count for them.
And I'm not taking exception. I just want to highlight, you said number 6 and number 8, so Copper Trails and Fighter Country came down to the last two. I just want to note and it's hopefully this doesn't come across as an insult to the group, but Fighter Country, we've got a lot of men and women that are E1s, E3s that are living far below some of our livable wages line, and that group does a ton to support our men and women on the base. And we have pridefully stood up as the protector of the Southern Departure Corridor, and we do a lot for Fighter Country. We've joined as members and that sort of thing. I just don't want, I hope.
You said yes.
And I know you said yes. I don't want it to come down to a tie in the future. They do a lot. We lost an
They
airman.
won. They got in.
I know. I just heard it came down to a tie.
You just putting the plug in.
I'm just putting a plug in for the group. They do a
Bob,
lot for the
I just want to make a comment. Everyone that put in, each one was talked about and considered important.
Yes, it was.
Because their goals that they had set for themselves were important. So you're right, it won't be
Well, and
forgotten.
hopefully next year with 2 teams and a lot more games, we can double up on this effort.
Yeah, sure.
So there'll be no losers.
Okay. Any comments, current events from the council? Comments from the city manager?
Oh, well.
Means adjourned.
Too bad.
I'll discuss it next week. That's fine.
Oh, she just wanted to say something about the education
All
side.
right, meeting
No. I'll say it next week.
No, do it right now. Go ahead.
Right now.
No.
Okay.
No.
Well, I just wanted to thank all of our staff, all of our school districts, and all the principals of every Goodyear school that came to our education summit. And thank you, council, for taking the time to be there. You know what? As I have stated, it was perfect attendance. It was really a great beginning to, I think, a lot of partnership between our districts and our community. And I'm really thankful for it going so well.
Great job.
Good job.